How you doing, ma'am?
Who is this, please?
I said, how you doing, ma'am?
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm shot, I think, maybe in 2 places.
Okay, what's your name?
My name is Richard Poplowski. I'm in my residence at 1016 Fairfield Street.
1016 Fairfield. Okay, hold on a minute, honey, okay? Okay, and what do you want to come out? Want to give yourself up or what?
I can't give myself up because I'm laying in a pool of blood and I can't really move, but I'm done taking innocent police officers' lives.
Welcome back, folks. Today, we dive deep into a case that starts with a seemingly minor domestic argument and ends with a tragic shootout. It's the story of Richard Poplawski and the 2009 Pittsburgh police shootings, a tale that's as shocking as it is heartbreaking. Richard Andrew Poplawski, born on September 12, 1986, grew up in the Stanton Heights neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He lived with his mother, Margaret Poplawski, and his grandmother. Richard's life was a mix of turbulence and anger, marked by failed relationships and a failed military career. Richard's life reads like a manual on how not to win friends and influence people. Kicked out of the Marine Corps for throwing a food tray at a drill instructor? That's a special kind of talent. After being discharged from the Marines, Richard struggled with job stability, working short stints at various places, including a glass factory from which he was eventually let go. This job loss hit him hard, adding to his already volatile temperament. His personal life was equally chaotic. He had a brief, tumultuous marriage to a young woman he met while in juvenile detention. That ended in divorce, leaving him emotionally scarred. He later dated another woman, and that relationship also ended disastrously with allegations of assault and violation of a protection order. Neighbors reported that Richard was often involved in arguments, including a couple of fistfights and an incident where he used a racial slur against a black resident. He moved to Florida in 2006 but was evicted by his landlord after her German Shepherd disappeared under his care. He eventually moved back in with his mother and grandmother in Pittsburgh. The morning of April 4th, 2009 began like any other, but quickly spiraled into a nightmare. Richard and his mother were arguing over a dog urinating in the house. In frustration, Margaret called 911 to have her son removed from the home. At approximately 7:03 a.m., Pittsburgh police officers Paul Shulo and Stephen Mile arrived at the Poplawski residence in response to the call. Margaret met them at the door, trying to explain the situation. Little did the officers know they were walking into a deadly trap. Richard, armed with an AK-47, a shotgun, and several handguns, lay in wait, wearing a bulletproof vest. Pro tip: if you're greeting cops at the door, a warm smile usually works better than, say, an assault rifle and tactical gear. As Officers Shulo and Mile entered the home, Richard opened fire. Officer Shulo was shot in the head and killed instantly. Officer Mile, too, was shot in the head as he tried to react. The shots were so sudden and lethal that they had no chance to defend themselves. Officer Eric Kelly, who had just finished his overnight shift and was heading home, heard the emergency call and rushed to the scene. As he arrived, he saw the bodies of his fellow officers and tried to assist, only to be shot multiple times by Poplawski. Despite his injuries, Kelly managed to call for backup, a heroic act that would ultimately cost him his life. Officer Kelly's bravery is nothing short of heroic, running towards danger when most would run away. It's the kind of courage that movies are made of, but tragically, this was all too real. The situation quickly escalated into a 4-hour standoff with police. Richard fired more than 600 rounds from his arsenal, keeping law enforcement at bay. SWAT teams arrived, but the bodies of the fallen officers remained inaccessible due to the continuous barrage of gunfire. Imagine your quiet neighborhood turning into a war zone, complete with SWAT teams and more bullets than an action movie. Not exactly what you'd expect on a Saturday morning. During the standoff, Richard called his friend, Edward Perkovich, and eerily declared, "Eddie, I'm going to die today. Tell your family I love them and I love you."
In the morning, or 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and said, "Eddie, I'm going to die today." And I heard gunshots. He said, "Tell your mother and your family that I love them and I love you, and this is probably the end." And he hung up the phone, and I couldn't get a hold of him.
This chilling phone call was just one part of the bizarre and tragic events unfolding. After hours of intense gunfire and negotiation, Richard finally surrendered. He had been shot in the leg by police and, realizing his situation was hopeless, decided to give himself up.
How you doing, ma'am?
Who is this, please?
I said, how you doing, ma'am?
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm shot, I think, maybe in 2 places.
Okay, what's your name?
My name is Richard Poplawski.
Okay, and where are you at?
I'm in my residence at 1016 Fairfield Street.
1016 Fairfield. Okay, hold on a minute, honey, okay? Okay, and what do you want to come out? Want to give yourself up or what?
I can't give myself up because I'm laying in a pool of blood and I can't really move, but I'm done taking innocent police officers' lives, so if they would come and get me, and that would be great.
Well, do you have any weapons on you?
I got plenty of weapons on me, but I'm not shooting any more cops because my weapons are either out of ammunition or they're disabled.
Okay, you're out of ammunition.
Almost, but I promise you that I'm not going to be shooting at any more fucking police officers. I just need...
Hold on a minute. Okay, and you want to come out now? Are you hurt?
I'm in extreme pain, and I'm going to go to jail and fight for the rest of my life.
Extreme pain.
Shift commander.
Hello, sir?
Yeah. Okay, good.
Are you guys outside?
Yes.
Okay, here's the deal. You're talking to Mr. Richard Poplaw.
He was transported to UPMC Presbyterian Hospital for treatment before being moved to Allegheny County Jail. And there we have it, folks. A man who started his day arguing about dog pee and ended it in a shootout with the police. Talk about escalating quickly. This tragic incident claimed the lives of 3 brave officers. Officer Paul J. Shulo II, 37, a 2-year veteran of the force, survived by his parents, 2 sisters, and fiancé. Officer Stephen J. Mayle, 29, also a 2-year veteran, survived by his wife, 2 daughters, parents, and 2 brothers. Officer Eric G. Kelly, 41, a 14-year veteran, survived by his wife, 3 daughters, mother, and sister. 2 other officers were seriously injured. Officer Timothy McManaway, 46, a 14-year veteran, shot in the hand. Officer Brian Jones, 37, a 3-year veteran, suffered a broken leg while climbing a fence. The aftermath of the shootings revealed several critical lapses in communication and response. Notably, the 911 operator had mistakenly entered "no weapons" into the system, despite Margaret Poplawski informing them that her son owned guns. Talk about a critical typo. Imagine thinking you're walking into a heated argument and instead facing an armory. Definitely not in the job description. In the days following the tragedy, Pittsburgh and the nation mourned the loss of the officers. A final radio roll call was held, a somber tradition honoring the fallen. Flags were flown at half-staff, and a procession of thousands, including law enforcement from across the country, paid their respects. Richard Poplawski's trial began on June 20th, 2011. The evidence against him was overwhelming, from his internet postings espousing white supremacist views to his explicit confessions during the standoff. On June 28, 2011, he was sentenced to death by lethal injection for the murders of Officers Shulo, Mayle, and Kelly. Justice was swift but bittersweet.
There was a powerful emotional release in this moment. The surviving, grieving family members, the prosecutors, they got every single thing they asked for from the Richard Poplawski jury. Emotional moments long awaited for the mothers and families of those hailed as fallen heroes. Loved ones of fallen officers wept and hugged as jurors found Richard Poplawski guilty on all counts and of first-degree murder of Paul Shulo, Steve Maley, and Eric Kelly. The prosecutor says it's a powerful moment for those families.
Really, they have not been able to grieve like normal homicide victim families have. I mean, their business has been the business of all the citizens of Allegheny County.
Deputy Police Chief Paul Donaldson says Pittsburgh police and the families are pleased and that the justice system works.
It's been 2 long years to get us just to this point, and we will never forget it. It was a traumatic experience for the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police.
That's the sound of applause from police officers and victims' families for prosecutor Mark Tranquilli as he left the courtroom victorious.
We're dealing with not just 3 families, we're really dealing with 4, and I think the 4th family is really the entire law enforcement community in Allegheny County.
The bond unites them as families left behind prepare to testify to the impact on them as victims.
We look forward to the penalty phase of the proceedings. We realize that it isn't over at this time.
For them, and obviously for the police officers that put their lives on the line that day to try and recover and save the fallen heroes, I think that it was a vindication for their bravery that day.
This jury gets Sunday off, then returns 9:30 Monday morning to take up the matter and hear arguments about whether Richard Poplawski should face life or death. You know, there was one person who stood up in that courtroom, literally, for Richard Poplawski this night. That was his mother. And Channel 4 Action News reporter Ashley Hardway has the story of what she's saying tonight.
Does anybody think for 1 minute that I wanted this for the community? That I wanted this for those officers, that I wanted this for their families, that I wanted this for me and my son?
Margaret Poplawski very emotional, very heated after learning a jury convicted her son of killing 3 Pittsburgh police officers.
Regardless of whatever he's done, I love him unconditionally. What am I going to say?
Judge Manning asked she be removed from the courtroom after the verdict as he was concerned she would have an outburst. She faced the reality even her son's attorney knew was likely inevitable.
I think to ask a jury to render a verdict on the death of 3 police officers and expect them to come up with anything other than a guilty verdict with this type of evidence would have been an unreasonable expectation on my part.
Margaret was inside her Fairfield Street home for the entire incident that Saturday morning. She never stopped her son or even tried. I asked her why.
I had to be there to understand it.
She blamed the incident on 911 dispatchers not informing police her son had weapons.
These officers, I don't feel, were heroes. What happened is it's not cowards versus heroes. It was failure of job performance, negligence.
She told me she had been a gunshot wound victim in that same home in the past, but didn't say who had shot her. I asked if she was afraid her own son would kill her. Were you afraid that he was going to hurt you if you said anything?
I don't know.
Now, we did speak to the Maley family afterward, and they say they are declining comment at this point, as is the Shulo family. We were not able to speak with the Kelly family, but as you know, they did not come over and want to speak with the media at this point. We do hope to bring you their stories after the penalty phase.
While Poplawski now sits on death row, the families of the victims continue to live with the loss every day. It's a stark reminder of the dangers police officers face and the ultimate sacrifice they sometimes make. Poplawski's execution date was initially set for March 3rd, 2017, but has been stayed pending appeals, which could delay the execution for years. The appeals process is lengthy and complex, ensuring that all legal avenues are exhausted before carrying out the sentence. The 2009 Pittsburgh police shootings remain a stark and painful memory for the community. It's a story that underscores the unpredictable nature of domestic disputes and the potential for violence that can erupt from seemingly minor conflicts. So, as we wrap up this tragic tale, let's take a moment to remember the brave officers who lost their lives that day. Their courage and dedication to duty are a testament to the best of what humanity can offer, even in the face of unimaginable horror. This incident serves as a grim reminder of the dangers law enforcement officers face daily. It also highlights the importance of proper communication and preparedness in emergency responses to prevent such tragedies in the future.
I don't know if the alcohol and maybe if the wine and me having sex with him, I don't know what it was that killed him.
The police recruits are back, the cadaver dogs, the forensic specialists, they're all here to go through and sift through all of this garbage, trying to find the body of 18-year-old Andrew Compton and any evidence that may be linked to his death.
You put him in the dumpster?
Next to Our Lady of Peace. But I put him in a box, and I had this nice rug in my bedroom. I did everything I could to make it nice, and I even had a coat in the
O'Brien also told investigators the sex was unprotected and that he is HIV positive.
Welcome to Louisville, Kentucky, a city known for its bourbon, horses, and now, thanks to this case, a chilling crime that left everyone stunned. This is the tale of Andrew Compton, an 18-year-old with dreams bigger than a derby hat and a heart as pure as Kentucky moonshine. Andrew hailed from Carmel, Indiana, a picture-perfect town where the biggest scandal was probably a PTA bake sale gone wrong. He was a freshman at Sullivan University, aspiring to be a culinary wizard. Andrew wasn't just another student. He was the kind of guy who made friends as easily as he could whip up a souffle. But life had a cruel plot twist in store for him. Enter Gregory O'Brien, a 40-year-old local with a past as shady as a Kentucky forest at midnight. O'Brien had a history that screamed trouble, substance abuse, run-ins with the law, you name it. And it was on a fateful October night in 2010 that Andrew's path crossed with O'Brien's in the most tragic way possible. Andrew, like many young adults trying to figure out who they are, ventured into the online dating world. The internet, a place where you can meet the love of your life, or in this case, a monster hiding behind a keyboard. Andrew told his parents he was going to a friend's place, but he was actually off to meet O'Brien, someone he thought might be interesting. Little did he know, this meeting would lead to a horrifying nightmare. When Andrew didn't come back, his parents immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't like him. They reported him missing faster than you can say Louisville Slugger. The cops swung into action, tracing Andrew's digital breadcrumbs straight to O'Brien's doorstep. And that, my friends, is where things took a dark turn. Now, here's where things go from bad to worse. Grab your seat and maybe a stiff drink. On the evening of October 28th, 2010, Andrew met Gregory O'Brien at his apartment. What started as a consensual encounter turned into something out of a horror movie. According to O'Brien's later confessions that were about as believable as a used car salesman's pitch, Andrew lost consciousness during their interaction. And instead of calling for help, O'Brien went full panic mode. He didn't just panic, he went completely off the rails. Instead of dialing 911, he decided the best course of action was, wait for it, necrophilia, followed by dismemberment. Yeah, you heard that right. Realizing he was in deep trouble, O'Brien bought cleaning supplies and garbage bags, classic moves from the How to Look Guilty 101 playbook. Over the next few days, he dismembered Andrew's body and scattered the remains in dumpsters around the city, hoping no one would piece together his gruesome jigsaw puzzle. But like in every bad criminal plan, something always goes wrong. The cops, already suspicious, zeroed in on O'Brien. With a search warrant in hand, they found Andrew's personal items and blood traces in O'Brien's apartment. When confronted, O'Brien's initial denials crumbled like a house of cards under the weight of mounting evidence. He eventually spilled the gruesome beans, leading to his arrest and a community in shock. So, how do you solve a crime involving dismemberment and dumpsters? Well, you roll up your sleeves and get ready for some good, old-fashioned detective work mixed with modern forensics. The Louisville Metro Police Department kicked off the investigation by tracing Andrew's digital footprints. They followed his online activity and phone records straight to Gregory O'Brien, the guy who seemed about as trustworthy as a used car with a great deal sign on it. With a search warrant in their hands, investigators descended on O'Brien's apartment like a SWAT team in a bad cop show. Inside, they found Andrew's cell phone and clothes, along with bloodstains that screamed, "Something very bad happened here." This evidence was promptly sent for forensic analysis, which confirmed it was indeed Andrew's blood. O'Brien, meanwhile, was singing a different tune under police interrogation. Well, more like a chaotic medley of lies and half-truths. Eventually, under the bright lights and mounting pressure, he confessed. And what a confession it was, detailing necrophilia, dismemberment, and a disposal plan that was both horrifying and utterly stupid. Key evidence included not just the blood, but also the garbage bags and cleaning supplies, making it clear that O'Brien's apartment wasn't just a crime scene, but a failed cleanup operation.
I don't know if the alcohol and maybe if the wine and me having sex with him, I don't know what it was that killed him. Well, I was so drunk that I just passed out, and I can remember I took him in the bedroom and laid his body next to me and just started crying and telling him how much I loved him. And then when I woke up, I took his body and I had like an old television box or something. I put it in, and then I had like this nice rug that I put over the top of it. And then there was also some stuff in my trunk that, yeah.
By Bellarmine?
By Bellarmine, yeah. And I just put, I don't know how I carried his body over there, but I put his body in the trunk and took him over there and put him in there.
Did you put him in the dumpster?
Mm-hmm.
Witnesses and digital traces further sealed O'Brien's fate, showing he was the last person to see Andrew alive. And so, with a solid case built on forensic science, confessions, and sheer investigative persistence,
well, I tried to bring him back to life. And I started crying, and I was like, please, come back to life.
Right now at 6, graphic details surface about the murder of a Sullivan University student. Andrew Compton disappeared in late October. Gregory O'Brien told police he picked up the 18-year-old. They say they went back to his apartment and had sex.
It was like kind of a strange position or something on that couch, and he was so small. And I looked up and he was dead.
More than a week later, police and cadaver dogs converged on O'Brien's apartment, reportedly detecting blood. In police interviews, he confessed to dumping Compton's body in the trash. A search of a landfill in Medora, Indiana, turned up empty, leaving Compton's grieving family with little closure.
Nothing you can put into words. It's been unbearable. It's something I would never wish upon anybody else.
Good evening to you. I'm Rick Van Hoos. The videotape confession that you just saw Gregory O'Brien gave to police was released earlier today. WLKY Steve Bergen has been reviewing the hours of tape, and he joins us live from the newsroom with more on this. Steve?
Rick, O'Brien talks about what happened the night 18-year-old Andrew Compton died inside his apartment.
Commonwealth versus Gregory Michael O'Brien.
A bearded Gregory O'Brien entered the courtroom for a pretrial hearing earlier today. This is the way he looked when he was questioned by Metro detectives last October.
He was like one of the sweetest, most innocent, cutest guys I've ever been with, and we were so similar.
O'Brien told investigators he gave Compton alcohol and drugs, and the two became drunk. He says he tied Compton's hands behind his back with telephone wire, then had sex with him on the couch of his apartment on Lucia Avenue.
It was like kind of a strange position or something on that couch, and he was so small. And I looked up and he was dead.
O'Brien told detectives for a time he thought Compton was in a coma, but then realized his neck was broken.
Well, I was so drunk that I just passed out, and I can remember I took him in the bedroom and laid his body next to me and just started crying and telling him how much I loved him and slept there all night.
Hours later, he folded the body and placed it in a box.
I had like this nice rug that I put over the top of it, and then there was also some stuff in my trunk that I put around him. There was like an old scarf and stuff like this, and all his clothes and stuff. And I took him to the dumpster.
O'Brien contradicted himself during the interview. While he placed the body in one dumpster, he threw Compton's belongings into another. A 10-day search of a landfill turned up no sign of Compton's body.
I didn't want to get in trouble, and I know that he wouldn't have wanted me to get in trouble. So that's what I did. And I figured that they would dispose of his body and that I could hide this for the rest of my life.
O'Brien is facing the death penalty, but not having a body poses a challenge for prosecutors.
It is a unique circumstance. Not unique, but it is unusual.
But you still think you can be successful in prosecuting a capital case without a body?
We'll do our best to do that, yeah.
O'Brien also told investigators the sex was unprotected and that he is HIV positive. Live in the newsroom, Steve Bergen, WLKY News.
The cops handed over the file to the prosecutors, ready to take O'Brien to trial. Grab your popcorn, folks, because the courtroom drama in Gregory O'Brien's trial was something straight out of a legal thriller. The prosecution came in hot, armed with forensic evidence, a chilling confession, and a narrative that painted O'Brien as a monster with zero remorse. They laid out the gruesome details showing how O'Brien had every chance to call for help, but instead chose a path of unspeakable actions. Forensic experts testified about the blood evidence, making it crystal clear that the traces found in O'Brien's apartment matched Andrew's DNA. This wasn't just a slam dunk, it was an alley-oop of prosecutorial precision. The defense, meanwhile, had their work cut out for them. They tried to spin a tale of accidental death and panic, portraying O'Brien as a man who made a terrible mistake in a moment of fear. They questioned the confession's validity, suggesting it was coerced. Nice try, but the jury wasn't buying it. It wasn't. Emotional testimonies from Andrew's family brought the courtroom to tears, reminding everyone of the human cost behind the legal battle. The most damning moment, though, was O'Brien's own confession played out loud. Hearing him describe the events was like listening to a horror audiobook narrated by the villain. Expert witnesses delved into O'Brien's psyche, painting a picture of a deeply troubled individual with a history of dangerous behavior. This wasn't a one-off. This was a ticking time bomb that finally exploded in the worst possible way. After weeks of intense testimony and cross-examinations, the jury delivered a verdict: guilty on all counts. Gregory O'Brien was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision that brought a sense of closure to Andrew's grieving family and a community that had been holding its breath. The aftermath of Andrew Compton's case was like a stone thrown into a pond. The ripples spread far and wide. For Andrew's family, the trial's conclusion offered justice, but not complete closure. They turned their grief into advocacy, championing online safety and awareness to prevent other families from enduring such a nightmare. Back in Carmel, Indiana, Andrew was remembered through memorials and scholarship funds, ensuring his legacy helped others pursue their dreams. Louisville, meanwhile, took a hard look at its online safety protocols, with schools and community groups ramping up efforts to educate young people about the dangers of meeting strangers online. Rest in peace, Andrew Compton.
Within the tapestry of human experience, where joy and sorrow intermingle, lies a story that echoes the complexities of love, loss, and the quest for justice. In Orlando, Florida, a tale unfolded that captivated a nation, weaving a narrative that transcends the personal and touches upon universal themes of human relationships. This is the story of Michelle Parker, a mother, daughter, and entrepreneur whose life took an unforeseen detour into mystery and heartbreak. Her disappearance, fraught with emotional upheaval and legal intrigue, presents a poignant exploration of the human condition, the resilience of a family in search of answers, and the relentless pursuit of truth in the face of uncertainty. Michelle Parker, known for her vibrant personality and entrepreneurial spirit, was more than just a headline or a case file. As a single mother juggling the demands of her mobile spray tan business and the joys and challenges of raising 3 children, she embodied the essence of determination and hope. Her life, marked by its ups and downs, was a testament to her resilience and her unwavering commitment to her family. In the backdrop of her bustling life, Michelle navigated the complexities of a failed engagement with Dale Smith, her former partner and the father of her twins. This relationship, once filled with promises of a shared future, devolved into a nexus of emotional and financial disputes that would later become crucial pieces in the puzzle of her disappearance. Dale Smith, a man whose life was a tapestry of his own, presented a contrasting image. With a history marked by legal entanglements, personal losses, and a series of turbulent relationships, Dale's past was shadowed by questions and uncertainties. His encounters with the law, ranging from minor infractions to more serious allegations, painted a complex picture of a man grappling with his own set of challenges. Their relationship, ignited in 2006, was a fusion of hope and eventual turmoil. The initial spark, which seemed to hold the promise of love and companionship, gradually gave way to a relationship marred by conflicts and misunderstandings. As Dale and Michelle's paths diverged, the remnants of their union became entangled in the legal system and public opinion. The dissolution of their engagement set the stage for a series of events that would escalate beyond the confines of a private dispute. At the heart of their conflict lay an engagement ring, a symbol of a commitment that never came to fruition, and a point of contention that would ignite further discord. Michelle's alleged act of discarding the ring during a heated moment symbolized more than just the end of their relationship. It became a catalyst for the ensuing legal and emotional battles that followed. Their story, however, was far from over. What began as a private struggle soon spilled into the public domain, setting the stage for a series of events that would captivate and perplex a nation. The dynamics of Michelle and Dale's post-breakup relationship took a dramatic turn when Dale decided to bring their dispute over the engagement ring to a national audience.
We were dating for about 4 years.
A roller coaster romance.
He said that he wanted his ring, so I threw it at him.
Derails.
I felt somebody grab me and yank me around. He's crying, I'm crying, he's sorry, I'm sorry. We brushed it under the rug and I stayed with him for a few more months.
You're like drugs to each other. You're addicted to each other.
Next People's Court.
Choosing to air their grievances on the People's Court was a move that not only surprised Michelle, but also plunged her into a scenario she had once found entertaining, yet never imagined being a part of. This decision would later be scrutinized for its timing and intentions, adding layers of complexity to an already intricate situation. On the show, which was recorded prior to its airing, the couple's turbulent relationship was laid bare for the public to see. Accusations and revelations made by Michelle painted a picture of a relationship fraught with issues, including infidelity and physical confrontations. The judge's decision to have the cost of the ring split represented a legal resolution to one aspect of their conflict, but emotionally, the wounds were far from healed. For Michelle, the experience was a humiliating ordeal, an exposure of her personal life that she had neither sought nor desired. The fateful day of Michelle's disappearance, November 17, 2011, was marked by a convergence of events that would later be dissected for clues and meanings. The airing of the People's Court episode featuring Michelle and Dale coincided with the last day Michelle was seen. The timeline of her day, including her final text messages and the routine act of dropping off her twins at Dale's residence, became critical elements in the investigation that followed. Michelle's sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through her family and community. The discovery of her vehicle, with its distinctive business decals removed, and the retrieval of her phone under circumstances that suggested foul play, deepened the mystery. The involvement of law enforcement brought the case into the public eye, raising numerous questions about the circumstances leading up to her vanishing. Dale Smith, the last person known to have seen Michelle, became a central figure in the ensuing investigation. His past, coupled with his actions and reactions in the aftermath of Michelle's disappearance, drew scrutiny from both the authorities and the public. Despite the lack of immediate evidence linking him to any wrongdoing, his refusal to fully cooperate with the investigation, including his reluctance to take a polygraph test, cast a shadow of suspicion. The search for Michelle Parker was extensive, involving law enforcement, family, friends, and volunteers. The initial phase of the investigation focused on piecing together Michelle's movements on the day she disappeared. Surveillance footage, cell phone records, and witness statements became key elements in constructing a timeline of her last known activities. The discovery of her abandoned vehicle, and later her mobile phone, added to the growing concern that Michelle had met with foul play. Despite these efforts, the investigation encountered significant challenges. The lack of direct evidence, such as surveillance footage capturing Michelle's actual disappearance, and the absence of a crime scene hindered the ability to draw concrete conclusions. As days turned into weeks and then months, the hope of finding Michelle alive began to wane, but the determination to uncover the truth only intensified. Dale Smith's designation as the prime suspect in the case by the Orlando Police Department brought a new level of intensity to the investigation. His past encounters with the law, his tumultuous relationship with Michelle, and his behavior during the investigation were scrutinized. However, the absence of concrete evidence linking him to Michelle's disappearance left investigators and the public in a state of frustrating uncertainty. In the wake of Michelle's disappearance, the legal focus shifted to the custody of her and Dale's twins. The contentious custody battle became a parallel storyline, with implications for both families involved. Michelle's family, particularly her mother, Yvonne Stewart, fought tirelessly to maintain a relationship with the grandchildren amidst the backdrop of suspicion and grief. The custody rulings, swinging back and forth, reflected the complexity of the situation, where the children's welfare was paramount, but the shadow of the ongoing investigation loomed large. For Michelle's family, the disappearance was a life-altering event. Each development in the case, each search that turned up empty, each court hearing, and each passing year without answers added layers to their grief. Yvonne Stewart, serving as both an advocate for her missing daughter and a grandmother striving to protect her grandchildren, became a public face of resilience and determination. The family's efforts extended beyond the search for Michelle. They became advocates for legal changes, seeking to protect the rights of families in similar situations. As years passed, the case of Michelle Parker remained in the public consciousness, a mystery that continued to evoke questions and speculation. The lack of closure not only affected her family, but also resonated with a community that had followed her story from the beginning. The hope for new leads, a breakthrough in the investigation, or even a confession that could shed light on what happened to Michelle, remained a distant, yet fervently held aspiration. Public's engagement with the case highlighted the vital role of community involvement in missing person investigations. It also brought to the forefront discussions about safety, particularly for women, and the importance of public vigilance in such cases. Community efforts in the search for Michelle, from organized searches to spreading awareness through social media, demonstrated the power of collective action in the face of adversity. The case also prompted conversations about the legal system's handling of missing persons cases, especially those involving complex family dynamics and custody issues. The legal battles over the custody of Michelle's twins raise questions about the rights of families, the welfare of children in custody disputes, and the intersection of family law with criminal investigations. Moreover, the challenges faced by law enforcement in gathering evidence and pursuing leads in Michelle's case underscored the need for advancements in investigative techniques and resources in missing person cases. Despite the passage of time, the case of Michelle Parker remains shrouded in mystery, with more questions than answers. The enduring questions about what happened to Michelle after she dropped her children at Dale Smith's residence, the motives behind her disappearance, and the location of her remains continue to haunt all those involved. The absence of definitive evidence and the lack of closure serve as a stark reminder of the complexities and limitations of criminal investigations in missing person cases. Michelle's family, while grappling with the pain of not knowing, continues their pursuit of justice and closure. Their journey is a testament to the strength of familial bonds and the human spirit's resilience in the face of unimaginable loss. The case remains a poignant narrative about hope, the relentless quest for answers, and the enduring impact of a single life on a community and beyond. The story of Michelle Parker transcends the specifics of her disappearance, resonating with universal themes of love, loss, and the search for truth. It is a narrative that reflects the complexities of human relationships, the challenges of the legal system, and the enduring quest for justice. As this story continues to unfold, it remains a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the unyielding strength of those left behind, still searching for answers.
First in Hernando County, right now, deputies are trying to figure out what led up to a shooting that killed this 17-year-old girl and injured another person. It happened in Brooksville near the intersection of Hazel Avenue and Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard.
A 17-year-old girl and her mother came to their office to report that she had been sexually assaulted. The very next day, detectives say 2 men showed up on their doorstep and fired shots. The girl did not survive.
You can see police still here on the corner of Hazel Avenue and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard as this investigation still in those early stages. What we do know is this community is mourning the loss of 17-year-old Hernando High School student Isabella Scavelli. Friends and school staff describe her as outgoing, joyous, friendly. She was an athlete. She played on the tennis team at Hernando.
Just wish she was like in a better place, like before any of this happened, like mentally. Because I know she was going through stuff personally, you could tell. But I never really asked her.
In a world where innocence should be protected, sometimes the very system designed to safeguard it becomes its undoing. This is the story of Isabella Scavelli, whose quest for justice in the face of evil led to a heart-wrenching tragedy. High school junior Isabella Scavelli embodied the aspirations of every parent. A distinguished honor roll student, an active member of her school's student council and the ROTC, Isabella was a beacon of hope and ambition. Her dream? To serve her country in the military. However, Isabella's bright future was overshadowed by a dark event. On February 6, 2023, accompanied by her supportive mother, she bravely walked into a sheriff's office in Brooksville, Florida. Isabella was there to report a heinous act of sexual battery allegedly committed by a man named Leonard White, known for his troublesome background. Isabella's courageous step was a testament to her unwavering sense of justice. Little did she know, this act of bravery would lead to a catastrophic turn of events. The very next night, the unspeakable happened. 2 armed assailants, strangers to the Scavelli family, unleashed a fury of violence at their doorstep. The attack left Isabella fatally wounded and her mother severely injured.
First in Hernando County, right now, deputies are trying to figure out what led up to a shooting that killed this 17-year-old girl and injured another person. It happened in Brooksville near the intersection of Hazel Avenue and Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard. Deputies tell us Isabella Scavelli was shot along with another person. Both were taken to the hospital, but Isabella died. Deputies believe it was a targeted attack. We spoke with one of her close friends just hours ago who says she was just talking to the 17-year-old before she was killed.
I know she was going through stuff personally, you could tell, but I never really asked her. Because she's always like laughing and joking.
Grief counselors were at Hernando High School today for teachers and classmates mourning the loss of Isabella. We asked the deputies about their leads in this case. They tell us they don't believe the person or people responsible are in the area anymore. If you have any information on this case, call the Hernando County Sheriff's Office.
Amidst the chaos, law enforcement officials launched a meticulous investigation. The The discovery of a discarded Nike tennis shoe near the crime scene led to a significant breakthrough. A name emerged from the DNA analysis: Keyshawn Woods. Further investigations unearthed a complex web of deceit and crime. Sheldon Robinson, an associate of Woods, was apprehended. Searches at their residences revealed cash, weapons, and drugs, linking them to the murder.
New this midday, 3 men are in jail, arrested in a murder-for-hire scheme that left a 17-year-old girl dead and her mother seriously injured. We're learning new details of that crime right now from the Hernando County Sheriff's Office. 10 Tampa Bay's Hannah Deneen live for us in Brooksville, joining us with the latest. And Hannah, investigators, they say that they've been working really hard on this case for months now.
Yes, Courtney, the Hernando County Sheriff's Office says this stems back 9 months to February 6th. That's when the sheriff says a 17-year-old girl and her mother came to their office to report that she had been sexually assaulted. The very next day, detectives say 2 men showed up on their doorstep and fired shots. The girl did not survive. Now, according to the Hernando County Sheriff's Office, the investigation that followed led law enforcement to 36-year-old Leonard White, the man accused of sexually assaulting the girl, as well as 21-year-old Sheldon Robinson and 22-year-old Keyshawn Woods. Detectives believe after the assault was reported, White contacted Robinson and Woods, offering $10,000 and cocaine in exchange for them to kill the girl in order to prevent her from pursuing charges against him.
A young lady who had, by all accounts, a very bright future, was doing things to set herself up for a bright future, doing the right things, making the right decisions. It does add a little bit more, maybe a tiny bit more passion to it when it is a true victim. And that's, as far as we know, everything we've seen, every rock we uncovered, this was a true victim of sexual battery and murder.
Now, the sheriff says that White and the victim knew each other prior to that sexual assault allegation, but did not say what their relationship was. In addition to this murder for hire, these men also face charges with witness tampering and disposing of evidence and more. In Hernando County, Hannah Deneen, 10 Tampa Bay.
Thank you.
In a shocking revelation, detectives deduced that Isabella's assailants were hired guns. The mastermind? None other than Leonard White, the same man Isabella had accused of sexual assault. The ensuing legal battles were fraught with tension and disbelief. Charges of sexual battery, conspiracy to commit murder, and other serious offences were levied against White and his accomplices. The case drew national attention, raising questions about justice and retribution. Isabella Scavelli's story is a harrowing reminder of the fragility of justice. A young woman with a promising future, her life was cut short by the very evil she stood against. Her story raises poignant questions about the price of seeking justice in a world riddled with darkness and greed. Isabella's legacy is a testament to bravery in the face of adversity. Her story is not just a tale of tragedy, but a call to action for a society striving for justice and safety for all its members.
Last week, a federal grand jury sitting in Tampa, Florida, indicted Leonard White, Sheldon Robinson, Keyshawn Woods, and Robinson's mother, Janet Williams. The indictment contains 13 counts. White, Robinson, and Woods are each charged with 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder for hire. White and Robinson also are charged with conspiring to possess with intent to distribute controlled substances, tampering with a witness, and obstruction of justice. Robinson also is charged with being a felon in possession of a firearm. This case is pending in federal court in Tampa. Woods and Williams had their initial appearances in federal court last Friday, and White and Robinson will have their initial appearances on November 9th. Woods has been ordered to be held in custody pending trial, and we will be seeking to have White and Robinson also held in pretrial detention.
It was a night like any other for Samantha Josephson, a bright and ambitious 21-year-old college student with a promising future ahead of her. Little did she know that a simple mistake of getting into the wrong car would lead to a horrific fate that would shake her loved ones and the entire nation to its core. Samantha Josephson was a shining star, a young woman with big dreams and an even bigger heart. Born and raised in Princeton, New Jersey, she grew up in the nearby town of Robbinsville. Samantha was a political science major at the University of South Carolina, where she excelled academically and had her sights set on attending Drexel University of Law to specialize in international law. With a full scholarship in hand, thanks to her impressive grades and tireless work ethic, Samantha was just weeks away from graduating and embarking on the next chapter of her life. Her passion for international law stemmed from her love of travel. During her time at USC, Samantha had the opportunity to study abroad in Barcelona, where she also explored the wonders of Madrid and Paris. Those who knew her best described her as a powerhouse, a young woman destined to make a positive impact on the world. On the fateful evening of March 28, 2019, Samantha made plans to go out with her roommate and friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Her boyfriend, Greg, who was supposed to join them, was back in his hometown at the time. Despite this, he encouraged Samantha to enjoy the night out, knowing she had been feeling down after hearing about a family member's failing health. The group hopped from bar to bar before settling at the Bird Dog Bar in 5 Points, a popular hangout spot for students. Throughout the night, Samantha stayed in constant contact with Greg, texting and begging him to make the 2-hour drive to be with her. Greg, however, reminded her of their plans to see each other the following weekend and stayed put. At around 2 a.m., Samantha decided to call it a night and head back to her apartment alone, opting to use Uber as she had done countless times before. Surveillance footage from outside the bar captured Samantha getting into a black Chevrolet Impala at approximately 2:09 a.m., wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After a brief phone call with Greg at 2:04 a.m., during which she informed him of her plans to head home via Uber, Samantha bid him goodbye and hurried into the waiting vehicle. Unbeknownst to Samantha, the car she entered was not her Uber, but a deadly trap set by a predator lurking in the shadows. Greg, ever the attentive boyfriend, tracked Samantha's location using the Find My Friends app to ensure she arrived home safely. To his growing concern, he noticed her moving in the opposite direction of her apartment. Initially, brushing it off as a potential detour to a friend's place, Greg texted Samantha to check on her well-being. His messages went unanswered and calls to her phone rang endlessly. The app showed his messages as delivered but unread, and then her location stopped updating entirely, an unprecedented occurrence in their relationship. As the night turned to morning, Greg's worry intensified. He reached out to Samantha's friends and roommate, desperate for any news of her whereabouts, but no one had seen or heard from her. Clinging to the hope that she might have simply left her phone in the Uber, Greg tried to get some rest, praying that Samantha would turn up safe and sound. But Samantha never made it home that night. Her roommates, gripped by fear, reported her missing the following morning. Greg, his heart heavy with dread, made the 2-hour drive to Columbia to aid in the search for his beloved girlfriend. Less than 24 hours after Samantha was last seen on the surveillance video, a group of turkey hunters stumbled upon a grisly discovery in a wooded area 65 miles away from 5 Points, Samantha's lifeless body, bearing the marks of a vicious attack. The extent of the violence inflicted upon Samantha was staggering. Her body was riddled with more than 120 stab wounds, targeting her face, head, neck, upper body, leg, and foot. The deep gashes, likely caused by a double-bladed knife, and the evidence of her body being dragged into the woods painted a horrific picture of her final moments. The severity of her injuries led investigators to conclude that she had bled out within 10 to 20 minutes of the brutal assault. Samantha's autopsy revealed the shocking toll the attack had taken on her body. Dr. Thomas Beaver, who conducted the examination, noted that her body contained a mere 20 milliliters, 1.3 tablespoons of blood, a stark contrast to the typical 4 liters, 1 gallon, found in a healthy adult. The scarcity of blood made routine testing a challenge for the medical examiners. Despite the overwhelming odds against her, Samantha had fought valiantly for her life. The numerous stab wounds that penetrated her hands served as a testament to her desperate attempt to shield herself from her attacker's relentless onslaught. As the investigation into Samantha's murder unfolded, a chilling picture began to emerge. Surveillance footage from the area revealed the black Chevrolet Impala circling the block several times prior to Samantha's abduction, as if the driver were stalking the streets for a potential victim. It became clear that Samantha had unknowingly entered her killer's vehicle, mistaking it for her Uber. The actual Uber she had requested arrived shortly after, only to find her absent, prompting the driver to cancel the trip. Investigators theorized that Samantha's assailant had engaged the child-proof locks, trapping her inside the car and sealing her fate within minutes of her abduction. The day after Samantha's body was discovered, a breakthrough in the case occurred when officers spotted the black Impala driving through the very area where she had been kidnapped. They quickly pulled over the vehicle, and its driver, 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland, immediately fled on foot. The officers swiftly apprehended him, and a search of his car yielded a wealth of damning evidence. Despite the presence of bleach and cleaning products, Rowland had failed to thoroughly erase the signs of his heinous crime. Bloodstains were still visible in the car, and the child locks were engaged, corroborating the investigators' theory. Most incriminating of all was the discovery of Samantha's cell phone, which Rowland had unsuccessfully attempted to sell to a pawn shop earlier that day, rejecting their offer of $125. As investigators delved deeper into Rowland's background, they uncovered a history of criminal behavior. A resident of the area, living in close proximity to where Samantha's body was found, Rowland had briefly attended South Carolina State University in 2017, but was no longer a student at the time of the murder. His prior felony arrest in October 2018 involved a carjacking and assault, where he had sold stolen belongings, including a PlayStation 4. Armed with a search warrant, police descended upon the home Rowland shared with his girlfriend, Maria Howard. There, they uncovered further evidence linking him to Samantha's murder, including a blood-stained white sheet retrieved from a garbage can, a roll of duct tape, and bleach wipes bearing traces of blood. The most damning piece of evidence was a two-bladed knife, its surface marred with what appeared to be blood. Forensic testing would later confirm that the blood found on the knife, the sheets, the car, and the bleach wipes all belonged to Samantha Josephson. Moreover, traces of her DNA were discovered beneath Rowland's fingernails, solidifying the physical evidence against him. Nathaniel Rowland was subsequently charged with kidnapping, murder, and possession of a weapon during the commission of a crime. As the prosecution built an ironclad case against Rowland, Samantha's family grappled with the profound loss of their beloved daughter and friend. They held a vigil in her hometown of Robbinsville, New Jersey, where loved ones gathered to share memories of the vibrant, kind-hearted young woman whose life had been cut tragically short. The trial proved to be an ordeal for the Josephson family, as Rowland maintained his innocence in the face of overwhelming evidence. His public defender argued that the lack of visible injuries on Rowland's body indicated that he had not engaged in a struggle with anyone, and pointed out the absence of his DNA on Samantha's body. However, the mountain of evidence against Rowland was insurmountable. From his phone pinging near the location where Samantha's body was discovered to the handwriting expert's testimony linking him to a damning list of items found in his home, the prosecution painted a clear picture of premeditation and guilt. The list, scrawled on a piece of paper, included chilling entries such as duct tape, tape her whole body, gloves, all black, flip phone, gasoline, matches. Over the course of the trial, prosecutors called 31 witnesses to the stand, each offering a piece of the puzzle that would ultimately seal Rowland's fate. From eyewitnesses who saw him cleaning the murder weapon to the pawn shop owner he had attempted to sell Samantha's phone to, the evidence mounted. Even Rowland's ex-girlfriend testified that her daughter had blood on her shoe after being in his car shortly after the killing. In a mere hour, the jury returned a guilty verdict, and Nathaniel Rowland was sentenced to life in prison. Although South Carolina still employs the death penalty, prosecutors opted not to seek it in this case. Nonetheless, Rowland's fate was sealed. He would spend the remainder of his days behind bars. During the sentencing, Circuit Judge Clifton Newman addressed Rowland, stating, "For whoever asked me for leniency, that's not part of my DNA." It was a crisp early morning on March 19, 2009, when 35-year-old Claudia Lawrence stepped out of her small house in York, England, to make the over 2-mile trek to her job as a chef at the University of York's Goodricke College. By all accounts, it seemed like just another normal Thursday for Claudia. She had made this same walk countless times before. But this morning, something went terribly wrong. Claudia never made it to work that day. In fact, she has not been seen since. Her sudden disappearance sparked a massive investigation that is still ongoing after nearly 15 years. Yet, detectives remain completely baffled about what happened to Claudia. How could this friendly, outgoing woman who loved her job and talked to her parents every day just vanish without a trace on her way to work? Was she the victim of an opportunistic abduction along her early morning walk? Had she become entangled in a dangerous love affair that turned deadly? Or could someone closer to Claudia be responsible for her disappearance? There are so many puzzling questions and still no definite answers. Claudia Lawrence lived in a row house just a few doors down from a popular local pub called the Nag's Head. She didn't own a car, so on the morning of March 19th, with her vehicle in the shop, she set off on foot shortly before 5 a.m. to make it to work by 6. It was still dark out, but Claudia wasn't too concerned about the walk. The weather was decent, and she made the trek to and from the university several times a week. When Claudia didn't show up for her shift that morning, her co-workers assumed she was running late. But as the morning stretched on with no sign of Claudia, her boss grew worried and tried calling her cell phone. There was no answer. Concern mounted when Claudia also failed to meet her best friend Susie Cooper at the pub that night as planned. Susie tried calling too, but couldn't reach her. Sensing something was very wrong, Susie notified Claudia's father, Peter Lawrence. Peter told Susie he had just spoken to his daughter the night before. She gave no indication anything was amiss. In fact, they made plans to meet up the next evening for drinks. Peter rushed over to Claudia's house with Susie. Inside, they found no signs of foul play. Her chef's uniform, money, and identification were all there. Her bed was made. A few dirty dishes sat in the sink, but both her cell phone and the small bag she carried her uniform in were missing. It was clear Claudia had gotten up that morning fully intending to go to work. But for reasons no one could explain, she had vanished somewhere along her normal route. Peter Lawrence reported his daughter missing, certain she would never intentionally disappear without telling her loved ones. However, police initially weren't too concerned, believing the 35-year-old would soon reappear. But as hours turned to days with no contact from Claudia and no activity on her phone or bank accounts, investigators knew something sinister had taken place. An extensive search began along Claudia's likely path to work. Police scoured the area but found no signs that she had been injured or killed in an accident. They checked surveillance cameras too, but could not spot her on any footage. Detectives started looking into her personal life for clues. By all accounts, Claudia was a friendly, caring person with a positive attitude who loved her job as a chef. She came from a close-knit family and spoke to her parents, Peter and Joan, multiple times a week. Her parents were divorced, but she had good relationships with both of them. Her best friend Susie said Claudia lived life to the fullest and nothing seemed off when they last communicated the night before her disappearance. So why would this woman with seemingly no enemies or personal issues just vanish on her way to work? The deeper police dug, the more mysterious the case became. There were no promising leads and no trace of what happened to Claudia after she left for work sometime around 5 a.m. on March 19th. Search efforts ramped up. They scoured rivers, sewer systems, and properties throughout York. They interviewed friends, family members, co-workers, and anyone who knew Claudia. But every avenue led to a dead end. As days passed with no breaks in the case, investigators started to believe Claudia had not gone missing voluntarily. They feared she met with foul play, possibly having accepted a ride from someone she knew or getting abducted along her early morning walk. Someone out there had to know something useful. But even as weeks went by, the frustrating silence continued. In late April, with still no solid leads, detectives made the shocking announcement that they no longer believed Claudia was alive. Although they lacked evidence of any murder, it had been over a month since she vanished without a trace. Police believe she most likely came to harm at the hands of someone she potentially knew and willingly left with. But who and why? This spawned rumors that Claudia, who wasn't known to be dating anyone seriously, may have actually had dangerous liaisons with married men or others who wanted to keep the affair secret. However, her close friends disputed allegations that Claudia was leading some double life. She went on occasional dates, but didn't have endless illicit relationships.
She was a beautiful 35-year-old single woman with no children, no ties, not even a pet to worry about. So I think it would be strange if she didn't go out and meet men for drinks or dates. She was quite entitled to do that.
Still, it remained possible she fell victim to someone hiding a dark side. Investigators made pleas for anyone who had romantic ties to Claudia to come forward, vowing confidentiality, but no one ever did. Claudia's stunned parents clung to the faint hope their beloved daughter was still alive somehow, even as the case grew cold. But without her body or any trace of evidence, police simply had no way to prove if she was dead or alive. Heartbroken but determined, Peter Lawrence refused to give up the search for answers. He tirelessly campaigned to keep Claudia's story in the public eye, hoping to shake loose that one elusive clue. But year after year, his efforts led only to crushing disappointment as not a single legitimate sighting of Claudia occurred and no new evidence emerged. Periodically, detectives pursued new leads that initially seemed promising. In 2010, they released photos of Claudia taken on her way home from work, the last known pictures of her before she vanished. That same year, police got a potentially significant tip from a TV appeal that breathed temporary new life into the investigation. In 2013, they searched Claudia's house again, hoping advancing forensics technology might uncover missed evidence. Over the years, police even arrested several local men whose names came up as persons of interest. But there never was enough to link anyone to Claudia's presumed abduction and murder. All possible suspects had ironclad alibis or simply no motive to harm Claudia. In 2021, over 12 years after Claudia went missing, investigators took the extraordinary step of draining a nearby lake to search the bottom, acting on a tip her body might be there. But just like every other effort thus far, the labor-intensive operation ultimately led nowhere. Today, almost 15 years later, Claudia's baffling disappearance remains an impenetrable mystery. Detectives still believe with near certainty she met a violent end, but lacking her body or any solid forensic evidence, police have struggled to elevate the case beyond a suspicious missing persons investigation. And without that crucial proof of murder or manslaughter, prosecutors cannot file charges against any suspects, even if police could definitively name them. For Peter Lawrence, now in his late 70s, the agony of not knowing what happened to his precious daughter continues after all these years. He vows to keep fighting for justice until his last breath or until the truth is finally uncovered. Until then, he hopes and prays that one day soon a critical clue will emerge, finally exposing the cold truth of Claudia's shocking fate. For her sake and her loved ones, investigators hope so too. This haunting case serves as a cautionary tale of why people, especially women, should always exercise extreme care walking alone in isolated areas or accepting rides at night from casual acquaintances. Claudia's story also highlights how quickly an ordinary morning can take a heartbreaking turn and change lives forever. Her deeply distressing disappearance also underscores the vital importance of coming forward with any small scrap of information that could help break open an investigation, even years later. As one top investigator pointed out, by staying silent, people may be protecting whoever harmed Claudia. For now, the vanishing of this bright, promising young woman with her whole future ahead remains an impenetrable puzzle. Without answers, there is no justice. And without justice, Claudia's devastated family continues living an endless nightmare. But until police uncover the full truth about what happened that dark morning in March 2009, the disturbing mystery of Claudia Lawrence lives on. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and share this video and subscribe for future uploads.
Today, we'll be diving into the shocking case of Brian Darrell Davis from Ponca City, Oklahoma. Now, before we get into the details, let me just say that this is a bizarre one. Davis gave so many different versions of what happened, it's hard to keep track. It's like he was auditioning for the role of world's worst liar. But don't worry, I'll do my best to keep it all straight for you. Our story begins in the early morning hours of November 4th, 2001. Brian Davis, then 27 years old, returned home from a night out with the lads. But when he got there, he found his girlfriend, Stacy Sanford, and their 3-year-old daughter were nowhere to be seen. Immediately, Davis was like, where's my family at? So he rang up Stacy's mother, 52-year-old Josephine Sanford, who everyone called Jody. Davis was like, hey, Jody, you haven't seen Stacy and the baby, have you? And Jody was like, no, Brian, I haven't. Is everything all right? Davis replied, yeah, everything's grand. But could you do me a solid and go look for them? Jody, being the concerned mother and grandmother that she was, agreed. Fast forward a bit, and Jody still hasn't located Stacy and the child, so she decides to pop on over to Davis and Stacy's apartment to see what's what. Little did Jody know, she was walking into a nightmare. Now, what transpired between Davis and Jody inside that apartment is still hotly contested. Davis has changed his story more times than a chameleon changes colors, but one thing we do know for certain is that Jody Sanford entered that apartment and she would never come out alive. At around 9 a.m., Stacy Sanford returned home and stumbled upon a scene straight out of a horror movie. There on the floor was her mother Jody, beaten, stabbed 6 times, strangled, and sexually assaulted. Can you imagine finding your own mother like that? It's the stuff of nightmares. Shocked and devastated, Stacy immediately dialed 911. Meanwhile, about 9 miles away, our guy, Brian Davis, was found seriously injured, having wrecked Jody's van in a single vehicle crash. He had been launched right through the windshield. Ouch! When the police arrived, they noticed Davis smelled like a brewery. Turns out his blood alcohol level was 0.09%. So not only was Davis suspected of murder, but he was also slapped with a DUI. Talk about a rough night. Davis was rushed to a local hospital and then later transferred to a hospital in Wichita, Kansas, due to his extensive injuries. It was there that he would have his first chat with the authorities about what the heck happened to Jody Sanford. That same afternoon, Detective Donald Bohan paid Davis a visit at the hospital, and let me tell you, Davis's first tale was a doozy. He told the detective he remembered being at the club with his buddies, but had no clue who drove him home or what happened once Jody arrived at his place. Davis was like, yeah, I remember Jody being in the living room, but after that, it's all a blur until I woke up in a field after crashing the van. Convenient memory lapse? I think so. 2 days later, detectives Bohan and Stieber decided to have another go at questioning Davis. Initially, Davis stuck to his "I don't remember" script, but as the detectives turned up the heat, Davis's story started to shift. Suddenly, he recalled arguing with Jody because she was giving him an earful about committing to her daughter Stacy. Davis claimed the argument turned physical, with Jody cutting him with a knife. He said he punched her in the face, breaking her jaw, and then managed to wrestle the knife away, stabbing Jody multiple times in the process. Apparently, after this brutal altercation, Davis decided to take a little nap. When he woke up, he freaked out, hopped in Jody's van, and sped off, leading to the crash. But wait, there's more. The detectives confronted Davis with evidence suggesting Jody had been strangled. Davis was like, oh yeah, I might have choked her a bit while we were tussling, but I definitely didn't have sex with her. No way, no how. Spoiler alert, that last part turned out to be a big fat lie. Big. Over the next few months, Davis served up 3 different versions of events to his girlfriend Stacy. First, he tried to convince her that he thought Jody was an intruder and he was just protecting their home. Then, He spun a yarn about arguing with Jody because he thought she was lying about Stacy's whereabouts, which led to a knife fight and a stabbing. But the real kicker came when Stacy confronted Davis with DNA evidence proving he had raped her mother. Backed into a corner, Davis concocted a new story. He claimed Jody came over distraught about her husband's infidelity. Davis, being the stand-up guy that he is, comforted her. One thing led to another, and they ended up having consensual sex. But then, according to Davis, Jody went full-on psycho, hitting him in the head with an object, and the stabbing occurred in the ensuing melee. Just when you thought Davis couldn't possibly come up with another version, he took the stand at his 2003 trial and spun a brand new tale. In this rendition, Jody came over searching for Stacy. They discussed Davis's need to commit to her daughter. Davis, showcasing his incredible sensitivity, made a tasteless remark about Jody's husband stepping out on her. Jody got upset, but Davis, ever the smooth operator, comforted her. They kissed and then supposedly had consensual sex for 15-20 minutes right there on the bedroom floor. But the story doesn't end there, folks. No, Davis had to take it one step further. He testified that after their intimate encounter, he informed Jody that the sex wasn't worth his time, and he could understand why her husband sought greener pastures. As you might imagine, Jody didn't take too kindly to this comment. Davis claimed she flew into a rage, whacking him in the head with a lotion bottle. What followed was allegedly a mad chase through the apartment, with Jody slashing at Davis with a knife. Finally, Davis managed to disarm her and proceeded to stab Jody multiple times as she reportedly continued her attack. Afterward, he said he wrapped Jody's lifeless body in a bedspread, caught some Z's, and then made a run for it, leading to the car crash. Despite the brutal injuries he inflicted, Davis maintained he never intended to kill Jody. The prosecutors were having none of Davis's tall tales. They called his constantly changing stories ridiculous and argued that the physical evidence completely contradicted his claims of self-defense and consensual sex. They brought in an expert witness who testified that the bloodstain patterns at the crime scene didn't match Davis's account of a mutual struggle. In the end, the jury saw through Davis's web of lies. They found him guilty of first-degree murder and rape, handing down a death sentence for the murder and a century behind bars for the rape charge. Over the next decade, Davis threw every legal Hail Mary he could think of, filing appeal after appeal, challenging his convictions and death sentence. His lawyers argued that his hospital bed statements to police should have been tossed out because he was doped up on pain meds. They also claimed that the trial court violated Davis's rights by excluding testimony about Jody's husband's supposed infidelity, which the defense believed bolstered Davis's story. But the appeals courts were not buying what Davis was selling. They determined that his hospital statements were given voluntarily and were fair game. As for the affair testimony, the courts deemed it irrelevant. With the mountain of evidence stacked against Davis, his ever-evolving stories, the sheer brutality of the injuries he inflicted on Jody, and the DNA proof that he had raped her, the courts concluded that none of the claimed errors would have changed the outcome of his trial. Davis's convictions and death sentence stuck. Convictions and finally, on June 25th, 2013, after exhausting all his legal options, 39-year-old Brian Darrell Davis found himself strapped to a gurney in the execution chamber at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. In his last words, Davis quoted the Bible saying he would live and not die. But it was too little too late for a man who had committed such heinous acts. Davis was put to death by lethal injection, taking his final breath at 6:25 p.m. It's hard to wrap your head around the sheer horror and heartbreak that Stacey Sanford endured. Can you imagine having your boyfriend, the father of your child, rape and murder your own mother, and then to be the one to stumble upon your mom's battered, lifeless body? That's the kind of trauma that never really goes away. But as if that wasn't enough, Stacey then had to listen to the man she once loved spin one outrageous story after another, desperately trying to explain away the inexplicable. Betrayal doesn't even begin to cover it. Stacey's world was shattered in the worst way imaginable, all at the hands of someone she trusted. You know, we often talk about justice and closure in these true crime cases, but the ugly reality is that no amount of justice can ever erase the pain and suffering caused by monsters like Brian Davis. Sure, he paid the ultimate price for his crimes, but that doesn't bring Jody Sanford back. It doesn't mend the gaping hole he left in the lives of Jody's loved ones. But at the very least, with Davis's execution, the Sanford family could rest assured that he would never hurt anyone else. They could finally close the book on this nightmarish chapter of their lives and begin the long, difficult journey of healing. As for Jody Sanford, a beloved mother and grandmother, she was robbed of her life in the most brutal, senseless way imaginable. But her memory lives on through the people who loved her most. May she rest in eternal peace, knowing that the man who took her life was held accountable and that her story will not be forgotten. Well, there you have it, Tonight, we're taking a trip to Hartford, Wisconsin to explore a heartbreaking case of betrayal, obsession, and a life cut tragically short. This is the story of Jessie Blodgett. Jessie was a bright, talented 19-year-old with a passion for acting, singing, and playing music. On July 14th, 2013, she gave the performance of a lifetime as the lead in a local production of Fiddler on the Roof. The audience adored her, but little did they know this would be Jessie's final bow. 3 days before Jessie's big show, another young woman named Melissa Etzler was walking her dog in a nearby park when she was attacked by a knife-wielding creep in plaid shorts. Melissa fought back like a warrior princess, grabbing the blade with her bare hands until she could yank it away from her attacker. The audacity of this guy. Thankfully, Melissa had the presence of mind to get a good look at him and his vehicle before he sped off. She gave the cops a spot-on description: white male, sandy blonde hair, pale skin, 18, 20 years old, 6'2", 210 pounds, driving an older model dark blue Dodge Caravan. But what did this have to do with Jessie? Well, buckle up, because this ride is about to take a twisted turn. The morning after Jessie's triumphant performance, her mom Joyce peeked in to check on her. Jessie was fast asleep, exhausted from her big night. So Joyce headed off to work while Jessie's dad Buck had already left for the day. But when Joyce came home for lunch a few hours later, Joyce enters Jessie's room and screams in horror. She walked into every parent's worst nightmare: her little girl was dead. Police lights flash as cops and EMTs rush around the crime scene. The horrific truth came out: Jessie had been tied up, brutally raped, and strangled to death, likely by someone who knew the family's routines and that they often left their doors unlocked. But who would do this, and why sweet Jessie?
Story will be featured on GMA in the morning. 12 News' Christina Palladino is live in Hartford tonight. And Christina, police gave an update on the investigation, but it's providing little comfort.
Yeah, the latest from the Hartford Police Department here tonight is an email that we got on our phones earlier today. They had no updates on the investigation, but they did want to stress to the community there is no threat here in the Hartford area. Now, I spoke with several of Jessie Blodgett's friends tonight. They tell me she had no enemies.
She
and
definitely made whoever she was talking to feel like they were the only person in the room.
Jacqueline was one of Jessie's
yeah,
best friends growing up together in Hartford. In fact, Jessie's parents asked her to paint this portrait of Jessie for her funeral. Jacqueline tells me she stayed up all night to do it.
I wanted to paint her. I've always wanted to paint her, so it was definitely a work of love.
Jacqueline and her friends say learning of Jesse's murder was shocking. The 19-year-old was found dead in her bed by her mother more than a week ago with strangulation marks to her neck. She had come home from a cast party for the local production of Fiddler on the Roof hours before. Police have only said they're in the process of an active investigation and that the public is not in danger.
Enter Dan Bartelt, Jesse's 20-year-old best buddy and former flame. These two theater geeks had been thick as thieves since high school. Dan was even front and center at Jesse's memorial, comforting her devastated parents. So imagine everyone's shock when Dan's dad's blue Dodge Caravan was identified as the vehicle used in Melissa's attack. When the cops called Dan to sort out this mess, he was literally in the middle of grieving with Jesse's family. Talk about awkward timing. But Danny Boy wasn't sweating it. He waltzed into the police station thinking he could charm his way out of this predicament like a regular Leonardo DiCaprio. Too bad the cops weren't buying his act, especially when they noticed his fresh cuts and scratches. Dan claimed it was just a little kitchen mishap. Just a boring accident while cooking, officers. No biggie. Except his own dad had already told police Dan was unemployed. Whoopsie! Caught in a lie right out the gate. But here's where things get really juicy. When asked about Jesse's murder, Dan casually mentioned she'd been raped. The problem? The cops hadn't released that detail to the public yet. Nice try, Pinocchio. That little slip of the tongue was all the detectives needed to start connecting the dots. And boy, oh boy, did Danny have some dark secrets lurking on his computer. Snuff films, violent porn, serial killer obsessions, you name it. This guy was Googling it. But one video stood out from the rest. It showed a crime chillingly similar to what happened to poor Jessie, right down to the creep washing the body and tucking her in bed post-mortem. Coincidence? I think not. From there, the evidence piled up faster than the body count in a Tarantino flick. Same type of rope used on Jessie found in Dan's garage? Check. Bloody cleaning wipes and a BDSM ball gag dumped in the park trash? Check and check. Oh, and let's not forget the most damning proof of all. Dan's DNA all over Jesse's crime scene, on the ligatures, and inside the rape kit. Told you this was going to be a doozy, didn't I? So much for the choir boy routine. Danny's web of lies unraveled quicker than a cheap sweater in a room full of kittens.
The murder charge against a young man from Hubertus is rippling through his family and friends. Violence, something they say was so out of character for 19-year-old Daniel Bartelt.
He stands accused of killing 19-year-old Jessie Blodgett last month in her Hartford home. 12 News reporter Nick Bohr is investigating this case and learned that Bartelt had a big secret he was keeping for months.
The image of Daniel Bartelt, accused murderer, simply doesn't compute for those who knew him.
He was a good guy. He was always joking around. He was a nice guy, so I was pretty surprised.
Did you ever see him have a temper or any violence? Or?
No, not really. I mean, he was always really in a good mood when I was around him. He was always joking around. I mean, if there was any like violence, it was just messing around. Yeah. You know, so couldn't even see this coming, really.
According to the criminal complaint, Bartelt told police and his family that he worked here at Roll Air Systems in Hustisford. But when we came here to find out what kind of an employee he was, they told us he's never worked here. When Hartford police told Bartelt's parents that he'd never been going to work at all, his dad told them that apparently lies have been very easy for Dan lately. So unlike Dan that his attorney questions Bartelt's mental competency. Though he's not representing Bartelt, criminal defense attorney Jonathan Smith says it's rare that a client can't understand the process.
Competency means that they lack the mental capacity to either understand the proceedings or to assist in their own defense.
A mental health exam will take place over the next month while Bartelt remains jailed. Now, if he's found not competent to stand trial, he would likely receive inpatient mental treatment until he could stand trial, Craig, but that doctor's report is due back next month for a hearing.
A jury wasted no time finding him guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, earning him a deluxe lifetime stay at the Crowbar Hotel. And how did Dan react to the verdict? By turning to Jesse's shattered parents and saying, "I kid you not, these chains don't make me guilty." The stones on this fella. No remorse, no apology, just the gall to plead innocence till the bitter end. If mental gymnastics were an Olympic sport, this guy would be taking home the gold.
A developing story now. It's life in prison with no parole for the Richfield man convicted of killing a former classmate. A judge sentenced Daniel Bartelt late this afternoon for the murder of 19-year-old Jesse Blodgett. Blodgett was discovered strangled in her bedroom in Hartford. WISN.
15 months after he was first hauled into court here. In a heart-wrenching sentencing today, Daniel Bartelt learned he'll be spending the rest of his life in prison. Daniel Bartelt was the reason everyone was here in court, but the young woman he killed, 19-year-old Jesse Blodgett of Hartford, was the person on everyone's mind.
You charmed us, you challenged us, you dazzled us and inspired us. So confident and free to be yourself. So encouraging of others to do the same.
Even as claimed he's innocent. Blodgett's family said bluntly they don't believe him.
I have a disgustingly innate ability to lie to myself that I've exercised far too many times in my life. But I refuse to hurt someone other than myself by doing that.
When Dan murdered Jessie, he killed not just who she was, but who she would become. She will never have the chance to be that woman. And I will never have the chance to know and love and admire and take pride in that woman.
Bartelt still faces 3 other charges, accused of attacking a woman in a park a few days before killing Blodgett. In Washington County, Nick Bohr, WISN 12 News.
The Washington County District Attorney called Bartelt the most dangerous person he's ever come across and successfully arguing that Bartelt will be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
His last hope for freedom was an appeal in 2017, crying foul over the police tactics that got him to spill his guts. Nice try, boyo, but the verdict stands. So, say goodbye to Danny as he takes his final bow, exiting stage left to the Walpun Correctional Facility for a permanent engagement. But this story isn't about the monster who snuffed out a bright light. It's about the incredible young woman who made the world a better place in her tragically short 19 years. Jessie Blodgett was a force of nature, a gifted performer, a devoted daughter, a loyal friend. She had so much love to give and so much life left to live. Though her story ended in tragedy, Jessie's legacy endures through her father's love-hate project, dedicated to ending male-on-female violence and inspiring love over hate. The world may never fully understand what drove her killer to commit such unspeakable evil, or the terror Jessie surely felt in her final moments, but we can honor her memory by choosing compassion over cruelty, creation over destruction, and hope over fear. Jessie, you were a shooting star, a supernova in human form. Your light will never be forgotten. And to her family, should you ever see this, I am deeply sorry for your loss. Thank you for fighting to create a better world in your daughter's name. Jessie would be so very proud.
The Chief's last act of service. I'm Paul Folger.
I'm Jessica Shambach. Investigators say someone shot and killed Nichols Hills Fire Chief Keith Bryan inside his home. We have team coverage tonight. Carla Wade has more on the Chief's organ donation. But first tonight,
I don't know, this man, this 26-year-old man with a hoodie cap on walked into our house to do our garage, and he walked into the living room and he shot my husband in the head. I just called 911 on my cell phone.
Yes.
Did you get are you coming to my house?
Today, we're diving deep into the twisted tale of Rebecca Bryan, a once respected real estate agent from Mustang, Oklahoma, who found herself at the center of a murder investigation that shocked the nation. This case has more twists and turns than a pretzel maker's workshop, so grab a snack and buckle up for a wild ride. Our story begins with Keith Bryan, a 52-year-old fire chief from Nichols Hills, Oklahoma. Keith was a stand-up guy, a real pillar of the community, and a hero to many. He had dedicated his life to saving kittens from trees and rescuing people from burning buildings, and his bravery and selflessness had earned him a shiny badge and the respect of his fellow firefighters. But on the night of September 20th, 2011, Keith's life was cut tragically short when he was shot in the head inside his own home. And who was the trigger-happy culprit? None other than his own wife, Rebecca Bryan. Talk about a plot twist. Now, I know what you're thinking. What could possibly drive a woman to murder her own husband in cold blood? Well, as we'll soon discover, Rebecca Bryan was no ordinary housewife. Behind her perfectly coiffed hair and megawatt smile lay a web of lies, deceit, and betrayal that would make even the most seasoned true crime aficionado's head spin faster than a dreidel on Hanukkah. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the case, let's take a moment to set the scene. Keith and Rebecca Bryan seemed to have it all. A beautiful home in the suburbs, successful careers, and a marriage that had lasted longer than most Hollywood romances. They had been together for 33 years, which is like a century in marriage years, and had raised two strapping young lads, Trent and Kent. From the outside looking in, the Bryans were the quintessential American family. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the surface, their marriage was shakier than a Jenga tower on a bumpy road, and Rebecca had a secret that would ultimately bring the whole thing crashing down. Rewind to 2009, when Rebecca met a man named Mark Holbrook at a real estate conference. Mark was a successful businessman from Hugo, Oklahoma, and the two quickly hit it off. They began an extramarital affair that was steamier than a sauna in July, and Rebecca fell head over heels in love. But when Keith found out about the affair in January 2010, Rebecca was forced to make a choice. She could either end things with Mark and try to patch things up with Keith, or she could kick Keith to the curb and ride off into the sunset with her new beau. Rebecca, being the indecisive type, filed for divorce but then had a change of heart and decided to give Keith another chance. Fast forward to the summer of 2011, and Rebecca's behavior had become more erratic than a squirrel on caffeine. She was constantly texting and calling Mark, even though he had made it clear that he was done with her. She was also engaging in a series of sordid sexual encounters with random men, including a stranger she met at a bar in Texas and a real estate client in McLeod, Oklahoma. Talk about mixing business with pleasure. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Rebecca's behavior was her complete lack of remorse or empathy for her husband. In the days leading up to Keith's murder, she was caught on tape telling a friend that she wished he would just kick the bucket already. She even joked about hiring a hitman to take him out, which is about as funny as a root canal without anesthesia. And then on the day of the murder, Rebecca took things to a whole new level of crazy. She stopped by her real estate client's house for a quick afternoon romp before heading home to Mustang. Later that evening, she left a voicemail for Mark, declaring her undying love for him and mentioning an expected inheritance. Gee, I wonder where she thought that money was going to come from. Just a few hours later, at around 10 p.m., Rebecca called 911 to report that an intruder had broken into their home and shot Keith in the head. She claimed that the shooter was a young man in his mid-20s wearing a hooded sweatshirt and that he had apologized to her before fleeing the scene in a small, dark pickup truck. Because nothing says, "I'm sorry," like a bullet to the brain, right?
Please. I don't know, this man, this 25, 26-year-old man with a hoodie cap on, walked into our house to do our garage, and he walked into the living room, and he shot my husband in the head.
Look,
I just called 911 on my cell phone.
Yes.
Did you get are you coming to my house?
Blue,
He turned around to me and he said, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry." He said that your husband should have hired me.
But as investigators would soon discover, Rebecca's story had more holes than a slice of Swiss cheese at a mouse convention. For starters, there was no sign of forced entry at the Bryan home, and none of the neighbors had seen or heard anything suspicious that night. It was almost as if the intruder had vanished into thin air Or maybe he was just a figment of Rebecca's imagination. Moreover, when police searched the house, they found a smorgasbord of incriminating evidence that pointed directly to Rebecca. In the laundry room, they discovered a .380 caliber Ruger pistol, a spent shell casing, a rubber glove, and a bullet-riddled blanket. The gun was later matched to a box found under Rebecca's side of the mattress, and the serial number confirmed that it was her weapon. Talk about a smoking gun! As if that wasn't damning enough, investigators also uncovered a trail of text messages and voicemails that painted a disturbing picture of Rebecca's state of mind in the days leading up to the murder. In one particularly chilling exchange, she told a friend that she was ready for Keith to go, and that she couldn't wait to collect on his life insurance policy. I guess money really can't buy happiness, but it can buy a one-way ticket to prison. Faced with a mountain of evidence, prosecutors charged Rebecca with first-degree murder and sought the death penalty.
Late breaking at 5, investigators said it wasn't an intruder, but the fire chief's own wife who shot and killed him. Keith Bryan died Wednesday after the shooting at his Mustang home. We have team coverage of the arrest. We begin with Wendell Edwards in Mustang. Wendell?
Paul, police say it all came down to evidence. You see, Becky Bryan was the only one home when she says someone came into her house and shot her husband. But police say that someone, according to the evidence, was her. She first told her story to a 911 operator. An intruder shot her husband.
I don't know, this man, this 25, 26-year-old man with a hoodie cap on walked into our house to do our garage, and he walked into the living room and he shot my husband in the head.
But investigators say evidence they found inside this house just didn't match. Specifically, a handgun similar to this one found in the clothes dryer in the utility room. Take a look. This is a picture from YouTube when the couple put their home up for sale earlier this year. The box the gun came in, we're told, discovered in the master bedroom, under the side of the bed where Becky Bryan slept.
Also found near the handgun box were 2 Blazer 380 auto ammunition boxes, the same brand of ammunition that was loaded inside that gun.
And take a look at this couch. Again, pictures from YouTube. Investigators found another piece of evidence here, a .380 caliber full metal projectile.
That projectile was recovered from the center cushion of the couch where Keith Bryan had been seated at the time he was shot.
Police arrested Becky Bryan without incident just past noon at this hotel in Oklahoma City.
It's a safe community. It continues to be a safe community. This was an isolated domestic incident.
She's facing a murder one charge. And obviously a very difficult time for the Bryan family. I'm told that her family, they were present at that hotel when police and authorities arrested Becky Bryan. But tonight there are still some lingering questions. What about a motive, and will police make any more arrests? I'll answer those for you when I see you again tonight at 6. Right now we're live this evening in Mustang. Wendell Edwards, Eyewitness News 5.
But in a surprising twist, Rebecca's defense team managed to convince the jury to spare her life, arguing that she had been a victim of emotional abuse and that the shooting had been an act of self-defense. I'm not sure how shooting your husband in the head while he's watching TV qualifies as self-defense, but hey, I'm not a lawyer. In the end, Rebecca was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She remains behind bars to this day, still maintaining her innocence and claiming that an intruder was responsible for Keith's death.
Rebecca Bryan was sentenced on Tuesday to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bryan was found guilty in May of killing her husband, Keith Bryan. Nichols Hills fire chief was shot to death in the couple's Mustang home back in 2011. Rebecca Bryan originally told investigators an intruder shot her husband, but detectives later found the gun, bullet casings in the couple's dryer. The items found in the home were key evidence in the case. The jury recommended a life sentence, which was upheld by Canadian County District Judge Gary Miller. Keith Bryan's colleagues, as well as the Canadian County District Attorney, spoke about the decision following today's court proceedings.
There were 12 good citizens from our county, from our community, that I agree with Mr. James, did a good job. They listened intently, they paid attention, they took their charge seriously, and they rendered a verdict. And that verdict was clear, it was undeniable, unmistakable, and the judge chose to follow that, which obviously we're pleased with.
Well, it's about what I expected. My reaction is kind of the same as it was at the trial. When it was over, I didn't feel relief. There wasn't anything to be happy about. It was just a real numb feeling. It's not quite that bad today. This is what I expected. I'm just glad it's over.
It's clear that he had lived his life devoted to helping others and to saving lives, and to have his life taken in the manner that it was is such a contrast. And again, it goes back to the brutal and senseless nature of his murder.
Keith will always live on with us at the fire department. He was there for 32 years. That's a long time, and he hired, I think, half of the firefighters we have now, he hired. So his legacy will live on for a long time, and he'll never really be gone from that department.
I guess denial isn't just a river in Egypt. But for those who knew Keith Bryan, there is no doubt about what really happened that night. He was a good man, a loving husband and father, and a dedicated public servant who had devoted his life to helping others. He didn't deserve to die at the hands of the woman he had loved and trusted for more than 3 decades. And yet, as tragic as Keith's story is, it's hardly unique. Every year, thousands of men and women are murdered by their intimate partners, often in a fit of rage or jealousy. These are the silent victims of domestic violence, the ones whose stories rarely make headlines but whose lives are no less valuable or important. In the end, the story of Keith and Rebecca Bryan is a cautionary tale about the dangers of secrets, lies, and betrayal. It's a reminder that even the most seemingly perfect relationships can hide dark and twisted truths, and that the people we love and trust the most are sometimes capable of the most heinous acts imaginable. But it's also a story about the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love and forgiveness in the face of unspeakable tragedy. In the years since Keith's death, his family and friends have worked tirelessly to keep his memory alive and to find meaning and purpose in the wake of such a senseless act of violence. They have started a foundation in his name dedicated to supporting other families who have lost loved ones to domestic violence. They have spoken out about the need for better resources and support for victims of abuse, and have worked to raise awareness about the warning signs of a potentially dangerous relationship. And perhaps most importantly, they have refused to let Rebecca's actions define Keith's legacy. They remember him as the kind, generous, and loving man he was, not as the victim of a brutal and senseless crime. As we close out this episode of True Crime Legacy, I want to take a moment to honor Keith Bryan and all the other victims of domestic violence who have lost their lives at the hands of their abusers. Your stories may not always make the front pages, but your lives matter, and your memories will live on through the people who loved you. And to anyone out there who may be struggling in an abusive relationship, I want you to know that you are not alone. There is help available, and there are people who care about you and want to see you safe and happy. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for the support you need to break free from the cycle of violence and abuse. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark and twisted world of true crime. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, if you ever find yourself married to a real estate agent with a wandering eye and an itchy trigger finger, maybe it's time to start sleeping with one eye open. Just a thought.
Now, and police in southeastern Indiana say he killed his brother because of an obsession with a television show. Both sides.
The facts are these. On November 29, 2009, Andrew Conley walked into the Rising Sun Police Department and told them that he had killed his little brother, Connor Conley.
Today, we're covering a disturbing case out of Rising Sun, Indiana, involving the murder of 10-year-old Connor Conley at the hands of his older brother, Andrew Conley, who was 17 at the time. Let's get into the background. Andrew and Connor lived with their parents, Sean and Bridget Conley, in the small town of Rising Sun, population around 2,500. By all accounts, Connor was a good kid, a fifth grader, honor roll student, lots of friends. Andrew was a high school student, but the family had recently withdrawn him because he had been cutting his arms. A red flag in hindsight. Now onto the fateful night of November 28th, 2009. The boys' parents were both at work, so 17-year-old Andrew was left to watch 10-year-old Connor. What should have been an ordinary evening turned into an unspeakable tragedy. Andrew would later tell police that he and Connor were wrestling when suddenly Andrew put Connor in a chokehold from behind until the boy lost consciousness. Connor's heartbreaking last words, "Andrew, stop." But Andrew didn't stop. Instead, he dragged Connor's barely breathing body into the kitchen, put on some gloves, and continued strangling his little brother for a full 20 minutes until blood came out of Connor's mouth and nose. Andrew then retrieved a plastic bag, put it over Connor's head, and secured it with black electrical tape. But the horror wasn't over. Andrew dragged Connor's body down to the basement, then outside to the car. Before putting Connor in the trunk, Andrew slammed the poor boy's head on the ground multiple times. I know it's hard to even comprehend someone inflicting this level of violence on anyone, let alone their own little brother. Shockingly, Andrew didn't go straight to dumping the body. Still with Connor in the trunk, Andrew first went over to his girlfriend's house for a few hours, even giving her a sweetheart ring. The girlfriend would later tell police Andrew seemed happier than usual. How twisted is that? Finally, around 11 p.m., Andrew drove to a wooded area by the Rising Sun City Park, near Connor's elementary school, and left his brother's body there, partially concealed with some vegetation. He then went home and, when his parents asked about Connor's whereabouts, claimed the boy was at their grandmother's house at. The next day, November 29th, is when things really started to unravel for Andrew. He confessed to 2 friends that he had killed Connor. Let's pause to appreciate that his first confessions were to teenage buddies, not the police. Real smart move there, Andrew. Later that day, Andrew walked into the Rising Sun police station and confessed. He told detectives he had fantasized about killing someone since 8th grade and compared his urge to kill to a craving for a hamburger. "I'm not loving it, Andrew." He also referenced relating to the titular character from the TV show Dexter, but I think we can all agree that Andrew is no Michael C. Hall. Police would find Connor's body that night around 8:15 p.m., and Andrew was taken into custody. The town of Rising Sun was rocked by the news. With a population that small, a crime this brutal really hits hard.
Documents with the confession police say Andrew Connolly made. It details how they say he murdered his little brother and why. Now, here are just a few of the details. Police say Andrew admitted to them when they questioned him. They say that Andrew placed his hands on Connor's throat and choked him. Andrew carried Connor's body to a wooded area and laid the body on the ground and covered it with vegetation. Police also say Andrew thought about doing different things to people, quote, taking a knife and cutting someone's throat or beating them to death with my hands. You know, this murder has rocked this small community of Rising Sun. This is a town where everyone knows everyone, a town that hasn't seen a murder in more than 15 years. Laura Borchers has reaction to our #1 story.
Officers say he told them killing was a hunger. Now, 17-year-old Andrew Conley is being held here at the Switzerland County Jail in a single cell.
I just live around the corner from where they found him.
Feet from where 10-year-old Connor Conley's body was discarded. Now walking through the small town streets of Rising Sun, Nancy Cohn, like many, is stunned.
Very shocked, very shocked. I mean, it's heartbreaking. You know, I mean, you can't believe it because this is such a beautiful town.
Prosecutors describe what happened last Saturday.
Andrew Conley choked his little brother until he became unconscious.
then dragged Connor into the kitchen to strangle his little brother for 20 minutes.
He then placed a plastic bag over his head and secured it with electrical tape.
Prosecutors add Andrew stuffed his little brother in the trunk of his car and visited his girlfriend before dumping Connor's body yards from his elementary school.
We felt that this was a cold-blooded murder.
It's shocking. I don't really know what to say. It's just crazy.
Kyle Munchin is just a year younger than Andrew Conley. He says he hadn't seen Andrew in school recently, and tonight he can't help but feel for the boy's parents.
My heart goes out to his family big time.
Bridget and Sean Conley had been at work and believed their youngest son was staying at his grandma's. But the next morning, detectives say Sean had awakened to Andrew standing over him with a knife.
I just hope they can get through it because it's just sad that their little boy is, there's no explanation why his brother did this.
Investigators say in Andrew's confession, he told them thoughts about killing someone began in the 8th grade. Officials today called Andrew Conley evil and are haunted by what they say were Connor's last words.
Andrew, stop.
Conley is not eligible for the death penalty because he is 17 years old. Prosecutors say they may consider asking for life without parole. In VV, Laura Borchers, News 5.
Andrew Conley also told police that he watches a show called Dexter and that he identifies with its serial killer. Dexter, as you may know, is a Showtime cable series about a covert killer who works for Miami, Florida's police department as a blood spatter analyst. But secretly, Dexter takes the lives of people who have escaped punishment for their crimes.
Okay, so here is what happens next. Andrew Conley is now at an adult jail in Switzerland County, and he will appear in adult court.
Connor's school brought in counselors and ministers to help the students and staff try to process this devastating loss. So, what was the fallout for Andrew? Well, due to his age, he wasn't eligible for the death penalty, but was charged as an adult with murder. In police interviews, he expressed no remorse, even coldly stating he felt he had to kill Connor. Prosecutor Aaron Negengard didn't mince words, calling Andrew a cold-blooded murderer. In a disturbing twist, it came out that Andrew had twice entered his father's bedroom that morning after the murder, standing over him with a knife. Luckily, Andrew ultimately didn't go through with harming his dad too. Small mercies, I guess. Fast forward to September 2010, and Andrew pleaded guilty to Connor's murder.
Plea today in the case of an Indiana boy accused of strangling his little brother.
Andrew Conley of Rising Sun changed his plea to guilty, and now he could face life in prison without the possibility of parole. Shannon Kettler explains how attorneys for both sides plan to argue sentencing.
Well, prosecutors say they, too, were surprised by the change in plea by 18-year-old Andrew Conley. Conley arrived in dress clothes for his trial this morning, but instead of jury selection, he told the judge he wanted to change his plea to guilty. Prosecutors say Conley strangled his younger brother, 10-year-old Connor, at the Rising Sun home back in November 2009. Andrew allegedly told police he watched a series called Dexter on Showtime about a serial killer and felt, quote, just like him. On Wednesday, prosecutors plan to ask a judge for Conley to serve life in prison without parole. The teen faces a minimum of 45 years in prison, but he wouldn't necessarily have to serve all of it.
One of the problems with the law in Indiana is good time credit starts at half. And then on top of that, they can get educational credits, which has been why one of the problems in this case is he's so young that almost any sentence he got, he would be out at a relatively young age.
Andrew's attorney tells us his client is remorseful and wanted to make this guilty plea from the very beginning. The judge will decide on sentencing this Wednesday. In Rising Sun, Shannon Kettler, 9 News.
At the sentencing hearing, prosecutors pushed for life in prison without parole, painting Andrew as a remorseless killer who would strike again. The defense argued for a lighter sentence of 65 years, citing mitigating factors like Andrew's age, lack of criminal history, and cooperation with police. After an emotional 5-day hearing, the judge ultimately sided with the prosecution. Citing the heinous nature of the crime and Andrew's lack of remorse, he sentenced Andrew to life without parole. a small measure of justice for Connor.
Andrew Conley is going to spend life behind bars. News 5's Brian Hamrick is live outside the courthouse with details on the sentencing. Brian?
Yeah, Jack, well, the judge here says that even though Andrew Conley is 18 years old, he should die of old age in prison before he is ever set free. And today, Conley was sentenced to the maximum. Andrew Conley is led from the courtroom after learning the length of his sentence is also the length of his life. He said nothing as he was taken back to prison, but did interact with his attorney.
He was basically just very subdued, tearful.
Cameras were not allowed in court, and only a handful of people attended the hearing. Andrew's step-grandfather was the only family member to speak.
I'm just glad everything's done and over with us, you know, that's all. It sucks, man.
I mean, it's not what you hoped for.
No, I gotta go.
The judge considered statements from Andrew's parents.
I never would have thought this.
And even his fascination with TV serial killer Dexter, heard in jailhouse conversations.
So Dexter got arrested? Dang.
The fact that the victim, Connor Conley, was under 12 years old was the aggravating factor that allowed the life sentence. Judge James Humphrey saying aggravating circumstances outweigh the mitigating circumstances beyond a reasonable doubt.
I believe if he ever got out of jail that he would kill someone else. The judge in his decision today is assured that that will not happen.
Now, defense attorneys say they do plan to appeal this, but new attorneys will be appointed for that process. Reporting live, Brian Hamrick, News 5.
As for Connor's parents, I can't even imagine the depths of their grief, losing not one but both sons in this tragedy. They've since divorced, and sadly but unsurprising outcome, my heart goes out to them. Looking back, it's hard not to wonder if there were signs, red flags, that Andrew was going down a dark path. The self-harm, the violent fantasies. In hindsight, it feels like this kid was crying out for help that never came. Not that anything excuses the choice he made to brutally murder his brother. What I struggle with is Andrew's motive or lack thereof. He never gave a real reason for killing Connor. The best he could come up with was saying he felt he had to, like a hamburger craving. I don't know about you, but I've never had a Big Mac attack so bad I wanted to strangle someone. And his efforts to emulate the Dexter character, a vigilante serial killer, make zero sense as Connor was an innocent child, not some criminal who escaped justice. It's like Andrew latched onto this edgy anti-hero to justify his own dark urges. But Dexter is a fictional character, and Andrew's actions have real-world consequences he'll be facing for the rest of his life behind bars. Personally, I think Andrew is a deeply disturbed individual. I don't believe he killed Connor because of a TV show. I think he likely would have acted on his homicidal fantasies with or without Dexter. The show was just a convenient scapegoat. But the reality is we may never truly understand what drove Andrew to commit such an unthinkable act of violence against his own flesh and blood. What we do know is that a young boy's life was cut short in a brutal way, and the ripple effects of Andrew's actions have devastated a family and a community. So I think the takeaway here isn't to point fingers at TV shows or any other boogeymen. It's to remember Connor, an innocent 10-year-old with his whole life ahead of him. It's to have compassion for his parents who are living every parent's worst nightmare. And it's to be aware of the warning signs in the Andrews of the world, the kids who are crying out for help, and do our best to get them that help before they make choices they can't take back. This has been a tough one to talk about, but I appreciate you taking the time to hear this story with me. Give your loved ones an extra hug today and take care of yourselves. I'll be back next week with another case. Until then, stay safe out there.
The mother of one of Kenyelle Brown's alleged victims wants answers.
The search for one man who may be connected to 5 murders in Metro Detroit.
This is Kenyel Brown, a man police want to get off the streets.
And U.S. Attorney Matthew Snyder acknowledges that for a period of time, Brown was a law enforcement informant. And he's
You come to my house and you tell me why my son was murdered by a man that was working for you. Then I let it rest.
Today, we're going to unravel the twisted tale of Kenyel Brown, a Detroit drug dealer who somehow managed to become a DEA informant and a serial killer. Buckle up, because this one's a wild ride. Our story begins with Kenyel Brown, a 40-year-old man from Detroit with a criminal record that could rival War and Peace in length. Brown had been arrested for everything from carrying concealed weapons to fleeing from police officers and even causing death while evading authorities. You'd think with a rap sheet like that, he'd be locked up tighter than Fort Knox. But oh no, Brown had a trick up his sleeve. In a move that can only be described as a cosmic joke, Brown was released from federal custody on October 29th, despite multiple probation violations. How, you ask? Well, it turns out some unidentified federal agency thought it would be a brilliant idea to use Brown as an informant for the Detroit Police Department and the DEA in a joint task force. What could possibly go wrong? Apparently a lot. Brown was about as useful as a chocolate teapot when it came to providing valuable information. He managed to complete one measly operation, which turned out to be a colossal failure. The powers that be paid him a paltry $150 for his supposed insider knowledge on gang activity and drugs in southwest Detroit, but it led to absolutely nothing. No arrests, no busts, just a waste of time and money. But wait, it gets better. While working as an informant, Brown allegedly decided to go on a killing spree, murdering 6 innocent people over the course of 6 weeks. It's like he woke up one morning and thought, you know what? Being an informant is boring. I think I'll try my hand at being a serial killer instead.
The search for one man who may be connected to 5 murders in Metro Detroit. This is Kenyel Brown, a man police want to get off the streets.
Investigators believe he's connected to 3 murders in River Rouge and 2 in Detroit. The latest happened overnight on Detroit's east side. A man was found shot to death in a vacant home on Minnesota near John R. Detroit police are calling Brown a person of interest. Coco McAvoy is live downtown outside of the U.S. Marshal's office. And Coco, what do we know about this man?
So the U.S. Marshals say he's from the Downriver area. They also say that he is armed and dangerous, but he's able to befriend people, so they want him in custody as soon as possible.
This is a situation where every day he's out there, somebody's at risk.
U.S. Marshal Aaron Garcia is part of the team searching high and low for Kenyel Brown.
We have the U.S. Marshals, ATF, we have a task force assembled working 24/7, Detroit Police Department, Michigan State Police. We have a joint task force with several agencies working around the clock.
That's because Brown is either the suspect or a person of interest in connection to 5 different homicides in River Rouge and Detroit.
It's somebody who's obviously on some kind of crime spree. We need to stop it.
Garcia says Brown follows the same M.O.
We know that he's befriending people, you know, at gas stations, you know, on the street, and you know he don't really have money. He has a weapon on him. He's violent.
But still, Garcia says people are taking Brown in to hide him from the authorities.
They're allowing him into their houses, and then we get another situation that we're looking at now as a person of interest.
Brown has ties to River Rouge and Ecorse, but has been spotted in Detroit and Highland Park too.
Who knows where he's at now, where he's moving to.
The U.S. Marshals are offering a $10,000 reward for any information leading to Kenyel Brown's arrest. And if you see Brown, of course, do not approach him, but make sure to call police. Back to you.
Yeah, and Coco, you mentioned that the authorities think that people are letting Brown stay with them in their homes. Do they think he might be paying people for that?
So the U.S. Marshals say that he does not have any money, but they believe that he's able to somehow convince people to let them stay in their homes. But they have a message for those people. They want to make sure that they know that they will, too, be charged in this.
All right. Thank you, Coco.
Detroit Police Chief James Craig claims that they had no idea about Brown's violent past, or they would have never brought him on as an informant. Craig blamed miscommunication during Brown's transfer from the ATF to the DPD DEA task force, stating that they were not informed about his extensive history of probation violations. It's like playing a game of telephone, but with people's lives at stake.
What I'm getting now preliminarily is that our DPD officer assigned to that task force was unaware of these failures or violations of his release. Unaware. Again, had we known, this is not a person we would have wanted to use.
Chief Craig is talking about Brown's criminal history that includes gun and drug crimes and a messy list of probation violations that has a lot of people asking if he should have been in prison instead of free and listed as an informant until...
Now, here's where the plot thickens. It turns out that U.S. District Judge Bernard Friedman was the one who released Brown from federal custody at the request of some mysterious federal law enforcement agency. The judge even had the audacity to give Brown a little motivational speech telling him to stay out of trouble and that he was entitled to a break. Well, I guess we can all see how well that worked out. As the bodies began to pile up, authorities finally started to connect the dots. They realized that maybe, just maybe, Brown wasn't the model informant they thought he was. On February 3rd, they deactivated him after learning he was a suspect in a double homicide. Talk about closing the barn door after the horse has bolted. Brown's alleged victims were a diverse group, including Lauren Harrington, Kimberly Green, Dorian Patterson, Garcias Woodyard, Amir Thaxton, and Eugene Jennings. Each one a life cut short, a family left to grieve, all because someone thought it was a good idea to give a career criminal a break. The story reaches its dramatic conclusion with Brown leading authorities on a high-stakes chase before ultimately taking his own life in the backyard of a suburban Detroit home.
And we have two big breaking stories. First at 4, an intense manhunt for a serial killer suspect in Detroit ends in gunfire, leaving that suspect dead. Also, a student drowns in the pool at Mumford High School. We have crews working both stories right now. Let's start with the search for that armed and dangerous man. It has all come down to a deadly ending in Oak Park. Let's go over to Local 4's Victor Williams. He joins us live from the scene. He was the first crew on the scene. Victor, what can you tell us?
Well, first off, this was a very intense situation. Me and my cameraman, Zach, we were the only ones here when we saw everything going down. We saw officers rushing to that backyard that you're looking at right over there on Ridgedale and Oak Park. We heard one single gunshot, and we believe that that was Mr. Kenyell Brown shooting himself. We saw him then being taken away on the stretcher. Right now, the chief is doing a press conference right over there. We pulled ourselves away so we could do this live shot really quickly, but once again, it looks like Kenyell Brown is in custody, of course. He did shoot himself. Reporting live, Victor Williams, Local 4, but we are going to go ahead quickly right now to something that the chief said earlier.
I was seen by a clerk at the bookstore. He'd been there in the past. He would ingest what he described as smoking rock cocaine. On today's date, no evidence that he was doing that. However, he was in there, and they wanted him to leave. But they recognized him from news reports. So at that point, 12th Precinct responded in very quickly. A couple of our neighborhood police officers were first on the scene. He had already left the location, so they began to check the area. At some point, they became aware that he may have crossed 8 Mile into the city of Oak Park. He did do that. We then, as we continued our search, certainly with the assistance from Oak Park, we then began to search the area. And at some point, Oak Park and our officers, after there was a canine search, saw him. He began to evade the officers' attempt to detain him. At some point, as he jumped a fence and went into a rear yard of a residence, he fired a single shot into his head.
Now, the homeowner, they understood all this was going on. They noticed the man in the backyard, and from there, they called police. And of course, they all ended up here to take this man into custody. We'll have more of that at 5 p.m. For now, we are reporting live in Oak Park. Victor Williams, Local 4.
All right, we'll let you get back to the Chiefs press conference and gather more information. We'll see you at 5. Thank you, Victor.
A fitting end to a man who left a trail of destruction and heartbreak in his wake. So there you have it, folks. The mind-boggling tale of Kenyal Brown, the world's most incompetent informant. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of cutting deals with criminals and the importance of thorough background checks, because sometimes the monsters we create come back to haunt us in the most horrific ways imaginable. But hey, at least we can all sleep soundly knowing that the authorities have learned their lesson, right? Only time will tell. This has been Eagle, your host on True Crime Legacy, reminding you to stay vigilant, stay safe, and always question the decisions of those in power. Until next time, keep your wits about you, and remember, trust is earned, not given.
Dave Mack, syndicated talk show host, so she befriends the mommy, the pregnant mom. She's like 8 months pregnant. Then she brutally attacks the new mom, cuts her stomach open, and takes out the unborn baby? What?
Today, we've got a doozy of a case from Worcester, Massachusetts, and let me tell you, it's a wild ride from start to finish. So grab a cup of your favorite beverage, settle in, and let's dive into the twisted tale of Julie Corey and the murder of Darlene Haynes. Our story begins way back in 2008 at the Southgate apartment complex in Worcester. Julie Corey and her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Alex Dion, were shacking up together. Now their relationship was about as stable as a one-legged chair, with Julie constantly accusing Alex of cheating on her. To make matters worse, Julie suffered a miscarriage while they were living at Southgate, which only added to the drama. Eventually, the two called it quits and went their separate ways. Fast forward to February 2009, and guess what? Julie and Alex were back together. Julie dropped the bombshell that she was pregnant again with Alex's baby, a little girl, and she was due on June 20th. But here's the thing. Their relationship was still rockier than a mountain range. They fought constantly about whether Julie was really pregnant, and Alex was getting suspicious because Julie wouldn't let him tag along to any of her doctor's appointments. Months went by, and Julie's supposed due date came and went. She kept feeding Alex different dates like they were going out of style. First, it was July 2nd, then July 4th. She even claimed she was scheduled for a C-section but got bumped off the list. Finally, she landed on July 24th. Julie was giving her friends and family the same runaround, changing the due date more often than most people change their socks. Enter Darlene Haynes, our victim in this tragic tale. Darlene was also a resident of the Southgate apartment complex and had briefly been Julie's neighbor. On July 23, 2009, Darlene was 8 months pregnant and ready to pop at any moment. That same day, Julie and Alex were at Alex's uncle's place, getting ready for Julie's alleged C-section the next day. They even packed the car with an overnight bag, because apparently that's what you do when you're expecting a baby that may or may not exist. Later that afternoon, Julie headed out, claiming she was going to a friend's house. But then she called Alex and casually mentioned she was planning to give Darlene a ride to the store. Alex thought this was fishy, since he knew Julie and Darlene weren't exactly BFFs. Darlene's landlord spotted her getting into a car with Julie around 3:30 p.m. that day. Later that evening, Julie came home but then left again to visit some mystery friend. Around 8 p.m., Darlene was seen at a package store near Southgate. And guess whose car was in the parking lot? None other than Alex's. From 8:45 p.m. to 11:20 p.m., Darlene was texting with a friend, saying another pal was coming over for a sleepover and that she was going to indulge in a wine cooler. In her last message at 11:20 p.m., Darlene said, "Good night." Little did she know it would be her last good night ever. Meanwhile, around 10 p.m., Julie started blowing up Alex's phone, complaining about stomach pains. An hour and a half later, she called again, saying her water broke and a friend was rushing her to a hospital in Framingham. A couple of hours after that, Julie announced she had given birth to a baby girl. Throughout the night, Julie kept calling Alex, whining about the hospital staff and threatening to leave against medical advice. During all this, the folks at Southgate were hearing some weird noises coming from Darlene's apartment. Between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. on July 24th, neighbors heard banging sounds like someone was rearranging furniture. Then, from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., they heard water running on and off in Darlene's place. Despite being weirded out, the neighbors didn't investigate or call the cops. July 24th, between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., Julie showed up at Alex's uncle's house with a baby girl in tow. Alex noticed the baby had dried blood all over her, and the umbilical cord was tied off with a string instead of the usual plastic clip hospitals use. When Alex asked about it, Julie claimed she told the doctor to remove the plastic clip because it was too heavy. Right, because that's totally a thing. Julie started parading the baby around, calling her bestie to share the good news and inviting a neighbor over to see the kid. The neighbor also noticed the blood and the weird string situation. Julie and Alex were broke, so the neighbor took them to the store to buy formula. Others who saw Julie with the baby that day commented on how small and cold the poor thing was. 2 days later, on July 26th, Julie and Alex packed up and moved to New Hampshire to stay with Julie's dad. But when they got there, Daddy Dearest said, "No way, Jose," and sent them packing to a motel. The next day, the couple hit up a welfare office in New Hampshire because Julie had been getting benefits for her supposed pregnancy. When asked for the baby's birth certificate or crib card, Julie was like, "Oops, I don't have either." Eventually, they found a shelter to crash at. While they were in New Hampshire, Julie started acting all kinds of shady about the baby. At a doctor's visit, she freaked out when the doc wanted to snap a pic of the kid and bolted before the doctor could grab a camera. Later, at the shelter, Julie was overheard saying, "Nobody's taking this child away from me." Spoiler alert, somebody definitely took that child away from her. Now, brace yourselves, because this is where things get really dark. On July 27th, Darlene's landlord went into her apartment to check on her pets and was smacked in the face with a nasty smell. In the bedroom, he found a blanket in the closet, and when he pulled on it, a leg fell out. It was Darlene's body, and it was a grisly scene. The autopsy revealed the horrifying details of Darlene's murder. She had been bludgeoned on the head, strangled with an electrical cord, and her abdomen was sliced open. Her reproductive organs were missing, and it was clear that her baby had been cut out of her. As the investigation unfolded, it turned out the baby Julie was parading around wasn't even hers. It was Darlene's biological child with her boyfriend, Roberto Rodriguez. Cops found no record of Julie giving birth at any hospital in the Framingham area. In Alex's car, they discovered a phony birth certificate listing Julie and Alex as the parents, along with documents about Julie's benefits and an appointment requiring her to bring the baby's birth certificate. Inside Darlene's apartment, investigators found evidence of a brutal struggle. The mattress was soaked with blood on both sides, and there were bloodstains all over the bedroom and kitchen. A Smirnoff bottle in the living room had Julie's DNA on it, and another bottle in the bedroom had her fingerprint. The prosecution argued that by July 23rd, Julie had lost her own baby and was freaking out. They said she was afraid Alex would leave her if she didn't have a kid, and that she'd lose her benefits. According to them, Julie saw Darlene and her unborn baby as the answer to her problems and decided to commit the unthinkable. But Julie's defense team had a different story. They argued that even if Julie took the baby, there was no proof she killed Darlene. They said there was no way Julie could have committed the murder, cleaned up the crime scene, gotten rid of the evidence, and taken care of the baby, all while constantly calling Alex. The defense pointed the finger at Roberto Rodriguez, Darlene's boyfriend and baby daddy. They brought up his history of violence towards Darlene, including a time he allegedly kicked her in the stomach and shoved her into a glass coffee table. Darlene even got a restraining order against him. One of Rodriguez's ex-girlfriends also testified about a time he grabbed her by the neck, dragged her into another room, and threatened to hang her with a belt. Yikes! The defense also brought up some other shady circumstances, like a witness seeing Rodriguez on July 24th walking away from a cemetery looking all kinds of sketchy. They suggested he could have buried evidence like Darlene's missing organs in the cemetery. Oh, and get this, when the cops first interviewed Rodriguez, he didn't even ask about the baby. Father of the year right there? But wait, there's more. The defense argued that the cops botched the investigation by not following up on leads and evidence. They mentioned people were seen going in and out of Darlene's apartment between July 23rd and when her body was found, including a guy named William Davio, who a neighbor picked out of a photo lineup. Another neighbor reported seeing a dude named Tim acting super suspicious in Darlene's apartment on the night of July 24th. Turns out Tim was Timothy Tripp, a buddy of Rodriguez's. The defense also ripped into the cops for not searching the cemetery where Rodriguez was spotted, not looking into the transactions on a debit card belonging to him that was found in Darlene's apartment, and not tossing Rodriguez's place or car. They also pointed out that a bunch of stuff in Darlene's apartment wasn't even checked for fingerprints, like a lamp with a missing cord that could have been used to strangle her. But despite all that, the jury still found Julie guilty of first-degree murder on 3 counts: premeditation, extreme atrocity or cruelty, and felony murder with the underlying charge of aggravated kidnapping.
Susan, a very, very emotional morning here in court, and the victim's father had planned to address the court personally, but he just couldn't go through with it. He was so distraught, so overcome with emotion. Legally speaking, the family of Darlene Haynes now has justice, but they say what they have is just not enough.
Present what he wanted to say.
In front of a stunned Worcester courtroom, the ashes of murder victim Darlene Haynes were displayed during the sentencing of her killer, 39-year-old Julie Corey. Darlene's father, Frederick Haynes, explains why he brought his daughter's ashes to court.
See what she did to her, you know?
Julie Corey was convicted last week of the first-degree murder of Darlene Haynes back in 2009 in Worcester. Haynes was 23 years old, a mother of 3 girls, and 8 months pregnant at the time. After the murder, Corey cut out and kidnapped the fetus and claimed she'd given birth to the girl. All along, Julie Corey has insisted she is not the real killer. Darlene Haynes' oldest daughter, Jasmine, now 9 years old, wrote a powerful victim impact statement, which the judge read in court.
Julie, I think it was mean to kill my mom. I think it was very bad that you did that. Signed, Jasmine Haynes.
Throughout the victim impact statements and the formal sentencing,
orders that you be punished, therefore, by being confined for a term of your natural life.
Julie Corey showed little emotion.
To me, it's not enough. Even if they get in a bunch of jail,
That's Frederick Haynes there, Darlene Haynes' father. He told us this morning he has never met his now 4-year-old granddaughter. She is being raised by her father. By the way, she is named Darlene Justice in honor of her late mother. Live in Worcester, Todd Kiskiewicz, WCVB, News Center 5.
After the conviction, Julie's lawyers filed a motion for a new trial, saying her original lawyer was incompetent for not calling a cell phone expert to testify about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. They also asked the judge to find her not guilty. The judge said no to a new trial, but tossed out the felony murder conviction, saying there wasn't enough evidence to prove Julie committed aggravated kidnapping. Both Julie and the prosecution appealed the judge's decisions. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court ended up siding with the judge on not giving Julie a new trial, saying the choice not to call a cell phone expert was a reasonable strategy and wouldn't have changed the jury's mind. But they reinstated the felony murder conviction, saying there was enough evidence to show Julie hurt the baby when she kidnapped her. Finally, the court decided not to reduce Julie's conviction to a lesser charge, even though she might have had postpartum depression and psychosis. They said there wasn't enough proof that her mental state stopped her from forming the intent to kill, or that she acted on impulse instead of being straight-up cruel. So, there you have it, folks. The tragic, twisted tale of Darlene Haynes' murder and the stolen baby. Julie Corey's actions ripped apart the lives of Darlene's loved ones and left an innocent child motherless. Even though the defense raised some questions about the investigation and pointed fingers at other suspects, the jury still thought the evidence against Julie was solid. It's hard to wrap your head around what could drive someone to do something so heinous. Was it a desperate attempt to keep a relationship afloat and fake a pregnancy, fear of losing benefits, or just a sign of a deeply disturbed mind? We may never know for sure. But one thing's certain, Darlene Haynes lost her life in a brutal, senseless way, and her baby will grow up never knowing her mom. This has been the story of Julie Corey and the murder of Darlene Haynes, a case that shook the community of Worcester and beyond. It's a chilling reminder that evil can hide in plain sight and that one person's actions can destroy so many lives. And that's all for this episode of True Crime Legacy. I'm your host, Eagle, reminding you to stay safe, stay vigilant, and hug your loved ones a little tighter tonight. Until next time, keep seeking the truth and fighting for justice. Thanks for listening, and remember, you're all legends in my book. Today, we're heading over to the Windy City, Chicago. Now, Chicago is known for its deep dish pizza, the Cubs, and unfortunately a bit of gang violence. But what happened on November 2nd, 2015, was something that left even the most hardened Chicagoans shaking their heads. This story is about a young lad named Tyshawn Lee, just 9 years old, who was lured into an alley and, well, let's just say things got very dark very fast. So grab your popcorn, because this is one case that's as tragic as it is jaw-dropping. All right, so Tyshawn Lee, born on December 13th, 2005, a little fella from Auburn Gresham, a neighborhood in Chicago that's seen better days. His mom, Carla Lee, worked her socks off to give Tyshawn a good life, while his dad, Pierre Stokes, was involved with the Gangster Disciples, a detail that's going to be pretty important in a minute. Now, Tyshawn was your typical 9-year-old. He loved basketball, video games, and just being a kid. But living in Chicago, even kids can't escape the shadow of gang violence. Tyshawn's dad's connections to the Gangster Disciples would, unfortunately, seal his fate. Okay, let's fast forward to November 2nd, 2015. Tyshawn goes to school, and after that, he heads to his local park to play some hoops. Innocent enough, right? But then enters Dwight Boone Doty, a member of the rival Black Pea Stones gang. Boone Doty, who likes to go by Murder, which is just a lovely nickname, had a sinister plan. So, Boone Doty approaches Tyshawn with a juice box and a promise to play some basketball. Tyshawn, being a kid and all, follows him into an alley at 80th and Damon, and that's where things take a nasty turn. Boone Doty, driven by a need for revenge against Tyshawn's father's gang, coldly executes the young boy. Multiple shots at close range. This was more than just a message, it was a statement in the cruelest way possible. The discovery of Tyshawn's body was heart-wrenching. The community was stunned, his mother Carla devastated. There were vigils, outpourings of grief and support, but also an undercurrent of rage. How could something like this happen to a child?
Police this morning trying to figure out if this was a case of a wrong person at the wrong time, or if this was a targeted shooting.
No, not my baby no more. He a good kid. He don't deserve that. He don't deserve that.
Now, here's what we know from authorities. This 9-year-old was using this alley to get a shortcut from point A to point B. Now, police say that at about 4:30, an altercation broke out in this alley. Shots were fired, and that's when they found this 9-year-old boy on the ground with multiple shots to the upper body. That's when neighbors called the police. Investigators arrived on the scene, scoured the scene, collected evidence for hours, interviewed people trying to find a motive.
It is unclear if this was a targeted incident or a tragic case of being at the wrong place at the wrong time. At this time, we do not have a concrete motive, but we will be working around the clock to find out more.
Now, police do tell me that the shots that hit this little boy were at close range, but again, they don't have a motive at this time. They're still investigating, and there are no suspects identified.
The police began their investigation, but gang-related crimes, they're tough to crack. The whole no snitching culture makes it difficult. But this case, the murder of an innocent 9-year-old, pushed people to talk. The community and the cops were not going to let this one slide. So, the Chicago PD launched an all-out investigation. They pieced together the events, talking to witnesses, checking surveillance footage. It soon became clear that Tyshawn's murder was a calculated act of revenge. Detectives zeroed in on Boone Doty and Corey Morgan, another Black P. Stones member. Morgan had a bone to pick with the gangster disciples because his brother had been killed earlier that year. Boone Doty and Morgan conspired to send a brutal message. Killing Tyshawn was their way of striking at their rivals. Cruel and cowardly doesn't even begin to cover it. By November 2016, police had enough evidence to make arrests. Boone Doty, already in custody for another crime, because of course he was charged with first-degree murder. Corey Morgan was also charged, accused of planning the whole thing and providing the gun. Their arrests brought a sense of relief, but also shone a light on just how deep the gang issues ran.
We begin tonight with breaking news. Murder charges tonight against the man police say executed 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee. Good evening, I'm Rob Johnson.
And I'm Erica Sargent. The 4th grader was shot multiple times after being lured into an alley by gang members. CBS 2's Mai Martinez is live in the newsroom with this breaking development. Mai.
Well, Rob and Erica, police arrested this man, Dwight Boone Doty, back in November on an unrelated gun charge. Now sources tell me he is the man police believe targeted, lured, and executed Tyshawn Lee. It was in this alley that 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee was shot and killed execution style on November 2nd after being lured there from a nearby park. Then Superintendent Gary McCarthy had this to say about the crime.
It was an act of barbarism, the assassination of a 9-year-old child as a gang retaliation to get back at his father.
Chicago police later said detectives believe 3 men were responsible for the cold-blooded murder. Corey Morgan and Boone Doty were picked up in late November on unrelated gun charges. Morgan and another man, Kevin Edwards, who is still on the run from police, were later charged with Tyshawn's murder. Morgan, who Tyshawn's mother knew, was ordered held on a $1 million bond.
I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it.
At the time, police said it wasn't clear which of the 3 men actually shot Tyshawn. But last week, investigators got credible information that Boone Doty was the trigger man. Tyshawn's mother reacted to the news on social media today, saying detectives told her not only did Boone Doty execute her son, but he had planned to torture him first. Boone Doty was charged tonight with first-degree murder, and in addition to Tyshawn's murder, he's also charged in another murder and an attempted murder. Local, state, and federal law enforcement are scheduled to hold a press conference tomorrow. Live in the newsroom, Mai Martinez, CBS 2 News. Rob and Erica.
Mai, thank you.
The community hoped that justice for Tyshawn would send a message. No more senseless violence. But as we'll see, the fight against gang violence is like a game of whack-a-mole. You deal with one, another pops up. The trials of Boone, Doty, and Morgan were the talk of the town. In October 2019, Boone Doty was found guilty of first-degree murder. The evidence was rock solid. Witnesses, forensics, the whole shebang. Corey Morgan's trial followed. Prosecutors painted a clear picture of his involvement, and he too was found guilty. Both men faced the music for their horrific actions, but it was cold comfort to a grieving community.
Now on to other news. The two men convicted of executing 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee will be locked up behind bars for decades. Dwight Boone Doty is a convicted triggerman. He was sentenced to 90 years. His accomplice, Corey Morgan, sentenced to 65. Prosecutors say in 2015 they lured Tyshawn Lee into an alley and shot him in order to get at his dad. They said he belonged to a gang that had shot Morgan's mom and brother. After Tyshawn's killers were led away in handcuffs, the young victim's mom and grandmother spoke out.
I'm just happy that I got justice today. I'm glad I got what I deserved. So I'm glad my son got what he deserved, and that's justice.
I'm satisfied, very much so. Happy and sad at the same time. You know, glad they're going away. I think this is the first day I thought about the other families, and I feel sorry for the moms and their siblings that's going through the same things we're going through despite their actions.
A third man, Kevin Edwards, drove the getaway car. He pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to 25 years earlier this year.
Tyshawn Lee's murder was a wake-up call. It showed the extreme lengths gangs would go to. It spurred calls for action. And since then, there have been efforts to tackle gang violence from the roots, community programs, more police, the works. But it's an uphill battle. Tyshawn's story is a tragic reminder of what's at stake and why we must keep pushing for safer communities. So, that's the story of Tyshawn Lee. A heartbreaking case that shows just how senseless and cruel gang violence can be. But in remembering Tyshawn, we honor his memory by striving for a future where no child has to suffer such a fate.
What happened to sweet 19-year-old Anaya Blanchard has haunted her loved ones since she disappeared October 2019 in Auburn, Alabama. She was last seen at a gas station where police believe she was abducted. On the next,
seems like it was actually set up and it was something that was planned.
Since the day I met Anaya, she always told me that that was her biggest fear, to be kidnapped or murdered. Like, as soon as she walked in, she would check every room. She would tell me multiple times, like, she had nightmares about it happening to her.
I have feelings that there may be somebody that she knows that has set her up.
Black, take a look at these photos. Auburn police need your help identifying this man. They say he was in the convenience store the same time Anaya was last seen nearly 2 weeks ago.
Today, we're diving into a case that had Alabama, and really the whole country, on the edge of their seats. It's the tragic and deeply disturbing disappearance of Anaya Blanchard, a bright young college student whose life was cut short in 2019. Buckle up, folks, because this one's a roller coaster of emotions. Now grab your coffee, tea, or whatever floats your boat, and let's get into it. Anaya Haley Blanchard. Remember that name, folks, because she was someone who truly lit up the room. Born on June 22nd, 2000, in Homewood, Alabama, Anaya was what you might call a triple threat. She had the brains, the beauty, and the athletic chops to boot. She was attending Southern Union State Community College and killing it in her classes and on the softball field. Family? Super tight-knit. Her mom, Angela Harris, and stepdad, UFC fighter Walt Harris, were her biggest fans. She also had a close relationship with her siblings. Life was looking pretty darn good for Anaya, but then, in a turn of events that no one could have seen coming, things took a dark and sinister twist. All right, it's October 23rd, 2019. Anaya's day starts out like any other. She leaves her apartment in Auburn, Alabama, and heads to a nearby Chevron gas station on South College Street. At around 11:21 p.m., security footage shows her entering the store. She's just picking up some snacks, minding her own business, nothing out of the ordinary, right? But here's where things get weird. She never makes it home. Her family starts to panic when she's not answering her phone or texts. By the next day, it's clear that something is very, very wrong. Angela Harris wastes no time reporting her daughter missing and the Auburn Police Department jumps into action. The search for Anaya kicks off with a bang. It's all hands on deck. Local cops, the FBI, the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, and the U.S. Marshals Service are all in on it. Then, on October 25th, 2019, they find a major clue. Anaya's black 2017 Honda CR-V, abandoned at an apartment complex in Montgomery, Alabama, about 55 miles from Auburn. Inside the car, things get even more disturbing. There's blood, and it's later confirmed to be Anaya's. Not looking good, folks. This shifts the investigation from a missing person case to something much more sinister. Foul play is now officially on the table. Time to play detective.
Tonight, the search is intensifying for 19-year-old Anaya Blanchard. This surveillance video shows the last time she was seen, more than a week ago, late at night, inside this Auburn convenience store. Police found her car 2 days later, damaged and parked at an apartment complex in Montgomery. Police say evidence inside her car points to foul play.
I love her so much, and I want her back so bad. And so I'm going to hold out hope.
Anaya's father says, watching the surveillance video, something about his daughter seemed off.
It was almost like somebody told her to do something. She was she looked kind of distant.
Alabama officials are offering more than $100,000 reward for any information in Anaya's case, thanks in large part to an outpouring of donations from the UFC community. Whoa! UFC star Walt Harris is Anaya's stepfather.
It's overwhelming to see them come up and, the governor, Kay Ivey, thank you for approving the reward.
That's our main goal. We have to find Anaya. We want her back. We want her back.
The cops review surveillance footage from the gas station and the apartment complex. Enter Ibrahim Yazid, a 30-year-old guy with a rap sheet longer than a CVS receipt. He's caught on camera at the gas station around the same time as Anaya. Coincidence? I think not. Yazid is no stranger to trouble. He's got charges ranging from robbery to attempted murder, and believe it or not, he's out on bond when this all goes down.
Possible break in the hunt for a missing Alabama college student, Anaya Blanchard. Police have now identified a suspect tonight. The student was last seen at a convenience store the night she vanished 2 weeks ago, and police are now releasing these images tonight of a man at that same store that same night.
An all-out search tonight for this man, Ibrahim Yazid, the 30-year-old named a suspect in the case of Anaya Blanchard, the 19-year-old Alabama college student missing now for more than 2 weeks.
He should be considered dangerous and would be potentially armed.
Late today, police announced an arrest warrant for Yazid for first-degree kidnapping. Auburn police released these 2 surveillance photos earlier. They say he was at the same convenience store where Blanchard was last seen alive. 2 days after her disappearance, her black SUV was discovered damaged and parked here at an apartment complex about 50 miles away.
What they're telling us is that they know that she was harmed in the car.
Blanchard's parents even meeting with the mother of Natalie Holloway, who vanished on a high school graduation trip to Aruba in 2005 and has never been found.
That's my baby girl, so I'm a fighter by nature. It's not just my profession. I've been battling all my life, and I'm not going to stop battling for her right now.
Police say additional charges and arrests are anticipated. There's now a $105,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest, David.
All right, Lindsay Davis tonight.
On November 7th, 2019, he's nabbed in Florida and charged with first-degree kidnapping. But wait, there's more! As the evidence piles up, those charges escalate to capital murder. The cops keep digging, and things start to click. Witnesses say they saw Yazid forcing Anaya into her own car at the gas station. Cell phone data and digital breadcrumbs place him at both the gas station and the apartment complex where her car was found. It's all coming together like the world's worst puzzle. But even with Yazid in custody, the burning question remains, where is Anaya?
Breaking news, an arrest has just been made in the disappearance of Alabama teen Anaya Blanchard.
Still no sign of this missing college student who investigators here in Alabama have been searching for weeks, but police have made an arrest. They've arrested a man who they say is a suspect in her disappearance. Blanchard was last seen in surveillance video at a convenience store, and her SUV was later found about 50 miles away from her home. In it, police say they found evidence that she was harmed. Around 2 a.m. this morning, authorities in Florida arrested 29-year-old Ibrahim Yazid. He, too, is seen in some of the surveillance video and was already out on bond, accused of attempted murder, kidnapping, and robbery from an incident in February.
The search continues with renewed vigor, volunteers, law enforcement, and Anaya's family desperately hoping for a miracle. And then, the news everyone dreaded. On November 25th, 2019, human remains are found in a wooded area in Macon County, Alabama. Forensic tests confirm the worst. It's Anaya. The cause of death? A gunshot wound. It's a gut punch to everyone who held out hope for a different outcome.
The remains were believed initially to be that of Anaya Blanchard, who was reported missing on October the 24th. It is with heavy heart that we so confirm today that the remains are, in fact, of Anaya Blanchard.
Investigators found remains in a wooded area off County Road 2 in Macon County Monday. 3 men have been arrested in connection to this case. Investigators believe Ibrahim Yazid kidnapped Blanchard. He was arrested earlier this month in Pensacola and is being held without bond. Investigators later arrested Antoine Squirmy Fisher, who's a convicted killer. They believe he helped Yazid dispose of evidence. He's being held on a $50,000 bond. And then on Monday, David Johnson Jr. arrested and charged with hindering prosecution. His bond set at $7,500.
This discovery turns the legal screws tighter on Yazid. He's now facing the full brunt of the law with capital murder charges. Anaya's family and the community are devastated, but they're also resolute in their quest for justice.
I just want to say I'm standing here representing my daughter. First I want to address the parents. Parents, you never think that something like this is going to happen to your child. You prepare them, you think you've prepared them enough. I thought I did. I talk to Anaya about it every day on the phone. But nothing you do can prepare you for some evil that is out there, y'all. Please. So I'm begging parents, put just a little bit more, teach your kids a little bit more. Now I feel guilty, maybe even nothing I could have done, but I should have prepared her just a little bit better for things she might have came into contact with. So I'm feeling a lot of guilt right now, even though I tell all my children and her. But kids, teenagers, little kids, big kids, adults, there are things going on in the world right now that you don't think are going on, and they're going on.
The courtroom drama is intense. Yazid faces multiple charges: capital murder, kidnapping, and robbery. The prosecution is out for justice, and they're not pulling any punches. But as is often the case, legal proceedings drag on and delays abound. Through it all, Anaya's family remains a pillar of strength. They push for reforms, including Anaya's law, aimed at tightening bail practices in Alabama. It's their way of ensuring that Anaya's tragic fate isn't shared by others. The disappearance and murder of Anaya Blanchard is a heart-wrenching tale of a young life snuffed out far too soon. It's a story that highlights the fragility of life and the importance of community vigilance. Anaya's legacy lives on through the tireless efforts of her family and the ongoing push for justice. So, as we wrap up this journey, let's remember Anaya not just as a victim, but as a beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Her story continues to inspire and mobilize efforts for a safer and more just society. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you in the next one.
Right now, family and friends are hitting the streets and passing out these flyers. Now, tonight,
I have no answers nowhere, don't know what's being done, no clues.
Tina Clark is on a mission to find her daughter-in-law.
Pregnant mother of 3, Jamie Adams, disappeared in December. Police found her body a few weeks later. Detectives have not made any arrests. They have not named any suspects, but they have focused on Jamie's husband, Justin, and his mother, Tina Clark.
Bach says detectives told his client that he and his mother are now suspects, but we checked with police who told us that claim is false.
By some miracle, you're watching this. I want you to know that I love you. And I can't wait to see you again.
Welcome to the story of Jamie Adams, a case that has more twists and turns than a roller coaster. Jamie was a 25-year-old mother of 3 living in Oklahoma City. Now, you might think her life was all diapers and daycare, but there was another side to Jamie, one that led her into a world of danger. December 10th, 2011. Jamie tells her husband Justin she's off to meet a client for a massage. But this wasn't any ordinary massage, it was a cover for sex work. Justin reports her missing when she doesn't return home. Now, Justin's initial story was that she was meeting someone at a McDonald's in Midwest City, but that's just where the trail begins.
The local man pleads for his wife to come home.
Jamie Adams is 2 months pregnant. She was last seen Friday night. Her van was found the next day abandoned in a local McDonald's parking lot.
My wife is a loving, strong woman.
It's a desperate plea from a family with few answers.
I'm begging that anyone who has any information about my wife or the whereabouts of where she may be to please contact the Oklahoma City Police Department.
The wife and mother of 3 vanished late Friday night. Her husband says Jamie was meeting a friend at this McDonald's. Police found the couple's van in the parking lot, but no sign of Jamie.
Obviously, our focus right now is locating Miss Adams and bringing her back to her family.
While police are short on leads, the family is not out of hope. Tonight, they're praying Jamie will be home soon.
If by some miracle you're watching this, I want you to know that I love you. And I can't wait to see you again.
The search was on, but days turned into weeks with no sign of Jamie. The police were starting to look at Justin with more than a little suspicion. After all, when a spouse goes missing, the other half is usually suspect numero uno. And then on January 7th, 2012, the search came to a grim end. Jamie's body was found in a wooded area near Lake Stanley Draper. She had been beaten and stabbed multiple times. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore, it was a homicide.
We begin tonight with new details about a missing mother found dead.
Tonight, police impounded her husband and mother-in-law's cars. Jamie Adams disappeared in December. The search for her ended when a biker found the pregnant mother's body at a dirt track in southeast Oklahoma City.
Right now, we are standing in the parking lot of the McDonald's where this investigation began, an investigation that is now focusing on 2 different cities.
One day after a biker discovered the body of Jamie Adams, Sky 5 captured investigators back at work, riding ATVs, combing a quarter-mile dirt track, searching for clues. Their main objective is to find out who killed this pregnant mother of 3. The 25-year-old vanished on December 10th, sparking an emotional and desperate plea delivered by her husband, Justin Adams.
If by some miracle you're watching this, I want you to know that I love you. And I can't wait to see you again.
Now, the Adams attorney, Irvin Bach, says the investigation is focusing on Justin and his mother, Tina Clark, who's seen here. Bach says detectives seized both of their cars and told them they were suspects, but police say that claim is false. And still, we know Justin told police that his wife was involved with prostitution on Craigslist.
But as the police pieced together the evidence, the mystery only deepened. What happened to Jamie Adams and who was responsible? With Jamie's body found and the case now a homicide, the police turned their gaze toward the person closest to her husband, Justin Adams. But was Justin a grieving husband, or was there something more sinister at play? Justin was arrested in January 2012, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for Jamie and 1 for their unborn child.
Late breaking news, I'm Matt Garcia. There has been an arrest in the Jamie Adams murder investigation. Jamie Adams' husband, Justin, has been arrested. This is video that we just got in of officers walking Justin into the Oklahoma County Jail. Justin was arrested at his residence for a warrant in connection with the death of his wife, Jamie Adams, and her unborn child. Formal charges have yet to be filed, but police are holding him on a first-degree murder complaint. Here's some background of this case. Jamie Adams, who you see there, was a pregnant mother whose body was found earlier this month at a dirt trail in southeast Oklahoma City. She disappeared in December. Police say she was on her way to McDonald's at the time. Some bikers found her body on January 7th. Since then, police have been investigating. They seized cars, family cars, email accounts, all along, also talking to her husband. Again, that was video of Justin being walked into the Oklahoma County Jail. Just to recap real quick, Justin Adams, he is the husband of Jamie Adams. He has been arrested today in this murder case. We continue.
The police had their suspect, but the evidence was thin. Justin claimed Jamie's involvement in sex work put her at risk from various clients. His defense argued that the investigation was too narrowly focused on him, ignoring other potential suspects. It was a classic case of he said, they said. In July 2013, the charges against Justin were dropped due to insufficient evidence. It looked like Justin might be in the clear, but the story was far from over. So, if Justin didn't do it, who did? The case was about to take another dramatic turn. Just when everyone thought the case had gone cold, a new piece of evidence emerged that would blow the investigation wide open.
Police seize a truck they believe is connected to a local mother's murder.
And that truck belongs to one of the last people Jamie Adams talked to. KOCO's Carla Wade is live. Carla?
Jessica, right now there's a for sale sign outside of Joseph Sears' house in Choctaw. Now, we already knew that police had talked to him, but today we found out the police also seized from his driveway a pickup truck. Who was the last person to see Jamie Adams alive? That's the question police have been trying to answer for weeks. But they do know that one of the last people to talk to Jamie before she went missing was Joseph Sear, who said he had responded to her ad on Craigslist. Jamie's husband told police his wife was working as a prostitute and used the site to find clients. One of Sear's neighbors, who asked us to conceal her identity due to the nature of this case, said she had heard news reports that Sear was tied to Jamie, but didn't grow concerned until he left town.
But I didn't know anything about Joe being involved in it until he up and moved. So that was what gave me the red flag.
A search warrant reveals that police believed evidence leading to the death of Jamie Adams may exist on the 1989 Chevrolet pickup. From inside, police took soil samples, swabs, and the insurance verification. Even so, police still have not named Sear or anyone else as a suspect.
You know, my neighborhood, I wouldn't have thought it would be something like that, something that bad.
Now, I actually spoke to Joseph Sear on the phone. I asked him about the search of his vehicle, but then he told me that he had no comment and hung up.
Enter Joseph Sear. DNA evidence found on Jamie's body linked Sear to the crime. Sear, an oil field worker with a history of violence, was now the prime suspect. Sear was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in 2014. This was the break the police had been waiting for. But who was Joseph Sear and how did he cross paths with Jamie? Sear had a history of domestic violence and was known to frequent the areas where Jamie worked. This wasn't his first rodeo, and it showed. As the trial date approached, both the prosecution and defense prepared for a legal showdown. The evidence against Sear was strong, but would it be enough to secure a conviction? February 2016, the trial of Joseph Sear began. The courtroom was packed, the media was buzzing, and the stakes were sky high. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Sear's DNA was found on Jamie's body, and he had a violent history. They argued that Sear killed Jamie during a violent encounter. But the defense wasn't going down without a fight. They tried to poke holes in the forensic evidence and suggested other suspects, including Jamie's husband, could have been responsible. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury was convinced by the prosecution's case. On March 5th, 2016, Joseph Sear was found guilty of first-degree murder. Sear was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served.
The crime happened in 2011. Today, the jury here at the Oklahoma County Courthouse took hours to decide Joseph Sear's fate, and it looks like he could be avoiding the death penalty. Now, Sear showed little emotion tonight as the judge read the verdict. Prosecutors say Sear responded to Adams' sex ad on Craigslist and killed her a few weeks after he had met her. Prosecutors say Adams was trying to earn money to pay her bills. Her husband, Justin Adams, was originally charged with the crime, but those charges were reduced to manslaughter after evidence on the body led them to Sear. We asked the assistant district attorney about trying this case nearly 5 years after it happened.
It didn't make that much difference. It was just the delay for the family that I think was the heartbreak in it. But our evidence was the same regardless of what time it was.
Tonight, the jury recommended life without parole. Sear will be back in the courthouse in December to learn his sentence from the judge. Reporting live in downtown Oklahoma City, Zach Rail, KOCO 5 News.
With Joseph Sear behind bars, you'd think the story ends there. But the aftermath of Jamie's murder left deep scars on her family and the community. Jamie's children were left without a mother, and Justin Adams had to rebuild his life after being wrongfully accused. The case also brought to light the dangers faced by sex workers and the need for better protections. The community rallied around Jamie's family, offering support and seeking ways to prevent such tragedies in the future. It was a time of healing, but also of reflection. Jamie Adams' story is a stark reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the often dangerous world that some are forced to navigate. The Jamie Adams case is more than just a true crime story. It's a tale of heartbreak, justice, and the quest for truth. From the initial disappearance to the dramatic trial of Joseph Sear, every step of this case was filled with twists and turns, but what can we learn from it? For Justin Adams, life has moved on, but the shadow of suspicion lingers. For Jamie's family, the pain of loss remains. And for Joseph Sear, a lifetime in prison is a grim reminder of the crime he committed. As we reflect on this case, we are reminded of the fragility of life and the impact of violence. Jamie's story is a call to action, to seek justice, to offer protection, and to remember those who have been lost. Jamie Adams was a mother, a wife, and a daughter. Her life was tragically cut short, but her story continues to resonate. This has been the story of Jamie Adams. May she rest in peace. Today, we're hopping into our time machine and setting the dial to the 18th century, because who doesn't love a good historical serial killer tale? Buckle up, folks, because we're about to meet one of Russia's most notorious lady killers, Daria Saltykova, also known as Saltychika. Our story begins with a typical noblewoman named Daria Nikolaevna Saltykova. Born in 1730, Daria married into the wealthy Saltykov family and soon became a widow at the tender age of 26. You'd think she'd channel her grief into knitting or perhaps gardening, but nope. Our girl Daria took up a hobby much darker: murder. Daria inherited a massive estate, and with it, the power over hundreds of serfs. But instead of being the benevolent lady of the manor, she decided to unleash her inner sadist. Between 1757 and 1764, Saltykova tortured and killed at least 38 of her serfs. Oh, and that's just the number she was convicted for. The real number is suspected to be over 100. Move over, Jack the Ripper. There's a new sheriff in town, and she's got a bone to pick with pretty much everyone. You see, Daria wasn't picky about her methods. She beat her victims with logs, burned them with hot irons, and even poured boiling water over them. And if that wasn't enough, she'd throw them out in the freezing cold just for kicks. Her victims were mostly young women and girls. Only 3 men made the unfortunate cut. She particularly had it out for the young and beautiful, which makes you wonder, was it a case of envy or just pure evil? Now, you'd think after the first dozen or so murders, someone might step in. But no, Daria was well-connected and complaints to the authorities were often ignored. It wasn't until two brave serfs who had lost their loved ones to Daria's cruelty managed to get a petition to Empress Catherine the Great that things started to roll. And boy, did they roll slowly. Let's pause here for a moment to really appreciate the bravery of these serfs. Imagine losing 3 wives to the same sadistic mistress and still mustering the courage to march up to the most powerful woman in Russia. Talk about nerves of steel. Daria was arrested in 1762, but the investigation dragged on for 6 long years. During this time, witnesses were intimidated, and the sheer number of deaths made the whole ordeal a bureaucratic nightmare. Picture this: a court full of powdered wigs and pompous judges slowly sifting through piles of grim evidence. If there's one thing that hasn't changed over the centuries, it's bureaucracy. Finally, in 1768, justice, or something resembling it, was served. Saltykova was publicly shamed, chained on a platform in Moscow with a sign that read, "This woman has tortured and murdered." Quite the walk of shame, wouldn't you say? But here's the kicker. Russia had abolished the death penalty in 1754, so our sadistic noblewoman didn't face the executioner's axe. Instead, she was sentenced to life in prison, and not just any prison, mind you, but the basement of a convent, because nothing says penance like being locked in a dark, damp hole beneath a house of God. She spent 33 years there, spitting on curious onlookers and generally being the charming individual she was until her death in 1801. Now let's take a closer look at Saltykova's methods and motivations. It's not every day you come across a serial killer who enjoys such a variety of tortures. Logs, hot irons, boiling water. Saltykova was nothing if not creative. It's almost like she was testing out new methods just to see which one she enjoyed the most. And her favorite targets? Young women and girls. The prettier they were, the more she seemed to hate them. It's like a twisted version of Snow White, but with a lot more blood and fewer dwarfs. Her fury seemed to know no bounds. She'd beat her victims for the smallest infractions. Didn't scrub the floor properly? Here, have a hot iron to the face. Dropped a piece of bread? Time for a boiling water bath. And if you think that's bad, imagine being thrown out into the freezing Russian winter without a stitch of clothing. All because your noblewoman boss decided she didn't like the look of you that day. But why did she do it? Some say it was out of pure evil, while others suggest she was driven mad by the betrayal of a lover. You see, after her husband died, Daria had a fling with a handsome young man named Nikolai Tyutchev. Things were looking up for her until she found out he was secretly married to a younger woman. Furious, she tried to kill them both, but they managed to escape. From then on, she took out her rage on anyone she saw as a rival, namely the young and beautiful women who worked for her. And speaking of her victims, it wasn't just the women who suffered. Men who worked for Daria had to watch as their wives and daughters were tortured and killed. One man lost 3 wives to Daria's cruelty. Imagine that kind of heartbreak. It's no wonder he finally snapped and took his plea for justice to the Empress herself. Empress Catherine the Great, to her credit, took the accusations seriously. She ordered a full investigation, and the case was blown wide open. Witnesses came forward despite their fear of retaliation. Over the course of 6 years, the authorities pieced together the full extent of Daria's crimes. The final count, at least 38 confirmed murders, though many believe the real number was much higher. But when it came time to punish Daria, Catherine faced a dilemma. The death penalty had been abolished, and executing a noblewoman could spark unrest among the aristocracy. So instead, they decided to go with a public shaming followed by a life sentence. Daria was chained to a platform in Moscow for an hour with a sign around her neck declaring her crimes. It was a sight to see, and you can bet the townsfolk turned out in droves to gawk at the woman who had terrorized so many. After her public humiliation, Daria was carted off to the Ivanovsky convent, where she spent the rest of her days in a dark, windowless cell. For 33 years, she lived in darkness with only a small candle to light her meals. She became increasingly deranged, spitting at visitors and shouting curses at anyone who came too close. Whether her madness was a result of her confinement or if she'd been on the brink all along is anyone's guess. Daria Saltykova died in 1801, ending one of the most gruesome chapters in Russian history. She was buried next to her relatives in the Donskoy Monastery necropolis, a final irony for a woman who had caused so much pain and suffering. Her story serves as a grim reminder of the horrors that can unfold when power is left unchecked. So there you have it, folks. Daria Saltykova, a woman who took Mean Girl to a whole new level. It's a story of power, cruelty, and the slow grind of justice. Remember, if you think your neighbor's a bit too nosy, just be glad they're not setting the bar with a log to your head. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and if you meet a rich widow with a penchant for piety, maybe give her a wide berth. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. See you in the next one.
The reward for information leading to the arrest of Jasmine Barnes' killer is now up to $100,000. That money has been raised by journalist Sean King, and police have released a sketch of a possible suspect along with the surveillance video of the truck the killer was driving.
Her uncle isn't a Boy Scout. In fact, he's in jail right now on a long list of felonies and got out of prison just before Hurricane Harvey. Sean King did not respond to repeated requests for comment. Haley, who fears for her uncle and her family's safety, wants this to spread too. He is innocent of this terrible crime.
And it is going to be justice for her, and I feel it in the bottom of my heart. It's going to be justice for her because there's too many people out here looking for this man. There's too much going on, man. And like I said, and we going to find him no matter what corner we have to turn, no matter what rock we got to go under, we going to find you, man.
A reward of $100,000 is being offered for information leading to that suspect's arrest. Jasmine's mother also said she believes
Houston, Texas, December 30th, 2018. A quiet morning shattered by gunfire. 7-year-old Jasmine Barnes, full of life and dreams, was gunned down in a drive-by shooting. Her tragic death sent shockwaves through the community and sparked a nationwide outcry. What happened that morning? And why was an innocent child caught in the crossfire of a crime that stunned the nation? This is the story of Jasmine Barnes, a case of mistaken identity and the relentless pursuit of justice. It was a routine Sunday morning. Jasmine Barnes, her mother, LaPortia Washington, and her 3 sisters were heading out for breakfast. Suddenly, a red pickup truck pulled alongside their car, and without warning, bullets tore through the vehicle. In a matter of seconds, 7-year-old Jasmine lay lifeless, her family forever changed. The immediate aftermath was one of confusion and heartbreak. Initial reports suggested the shooter was a white male in a red truck, leading many to believe the attack was racially motivated.
The reward for information leading to the arrest of Jasmine Barnes' killer is now up to $100,000. That money has been raised by journalist Sean King, and police have released a sketch of a possible suspect along with the surveillance video of the truck the killer was driving.
He's wanted for shooting the 7-year-old as she rode in her mother's car last Sunday. The little girl's mother was also wounded in the attack. Mother described the suspect as being pale with blue eyes. Some are expressing concern that this could be a hate crime.
A rise in hate crimes. The FBI just released a report about a rise in hate crimes. This particular area of Houston is known for a racial element. And so all of those factors playing together, it says that is a consideration that we should at least take on, but there's no confirmation.
The community was in shock, and the media attention was intense. Vigils were held, and the cry for justice grew louder. As investigators worked tirelessly to piece together what happened, the case took a significant turn. A $100,000 reward for information brought forward new leads. The breakthrough came when a tip led police to two suspects, revealing a dark and unexpected twist in the case. The tip led them to Eric Black Jr., a man with a record almost as long as his excuses.
Mr. Black has acknowledged his role in Jasmine's murder. We've also received information that this involves a second individual as well.
He confessed to driving the car, but of course, pointed the finger at someone else for the actual shooting. Enter Larry Woodruff, the man allegedly holding the gun and the brains of the operation. Eric Black Jr. and Larry Woodruff were arrested and charged with capital murder. The shocking revelation was that the shooting was not racially motivated, but a tragic case of mistaken identity tied to gang violence. Black confessed to driving the vehicle, and Woodruff was identified as the shooter. You know it's serious when courtroom artists have to get their pencils out. Black and Woodruff were in deep, and the charges reflected the gravity of their actions. Capital murder is not exactly a slap on the wrist, especially when a child's life is lost. The public was outraged, and rightly so. How could something so senseless happen? Jasmine's death galvanized the community. Rallies and vigils became common sights, and the call for action against gun violence grew louder. The family, though devastated, became vocal advocates for change, urging the community to come together to prevent further tragedies. The legal battle that followed was intense. Both Black and Woodruff faced capital murder charges, with the prosecution presenting a strong case based on Black's confession and other evidence. In the courtroom, it was clear that justice for Jasmine was the priority. The prosecution laid out a compelling narrative while the defense, well, they did their best. But with such overwhelming evidence, the path to justice seemed clear. In the end, the jury found both men guilty. Justice was served, but the pain remained. For Jasmine's family, there was no bringing her back, but knowing that those responsible were held accountable offered a measure of closure. Jasmine Barnes' story is a somber reminder of the innocent lives lost to violence. While her family and community continue to grieve, they also fight for change, ensuring Jasmine's memory lives on. In the end, justice was served, but the pain remains. This is the story of innocence lost and the enduring hope for a safer future.